And welcome to tonight's, or this afternoon's 15 February City Council meeting. And we welcome the members of the public who are in person and who are maybe watching our usual video feeds online. I'm happy to share that we have returned to a hybrid meeting approach. This is going to be a new environment for a lot of us because this is the first time we've been in second time we've been together the last couple months. So it's nice to be meeting again in person and be here with members of the public and my fellow council members and city staff. Hybrid council meetings allow people to join online through WebEx or in person at the city and county building. We are continuing to watch COVID rates to make the safest choice for all of us. If you are here joining us on site, the council is following CDC guidelines to prevent and reduce transmissions of COVID-19 and maintain healthy business operations and work environments. Per an executive order signed by Mayor Mendenhall, face coverings are required for vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals inside the Salt Lake City facilities. Therefore, we're asking everyone to keep your face coverings on at all times. For city staff and people here for briefing items, when you are addressing the council, you can remove it to ensure we hear your comments. Our staff is also here to help with seating in the audience so that social distancing can also be maintained. As many of you know, there is no public comments during the work session. However, please join us for the 7 p.m. formal meeting tonight to share any comments. Your feedback is always welcome, and you can share with the City Council anytime by mailing us at P.O. Box 145-476, Salt Lake City, Utah 84114. Or emailing us at council.comments@slcgov.com, or by calling our 24-hour phone comment line at 801-535-7654. We will now begin the work session items with the number one, the update from the administration. And I probably have on the screen up there, there she is. Hello, Rachel. Rachel Otto from the Chief of Staff, Lisa Schaefer, Andrew Johnson, and Chief Brown is probably also on that screen somewhere. It's all yours, Rachel.
Thank you, Council Chair. I just have a very, very few brief slides on COVID and the community engagement piece, and then I'll hand it to Andrew. And Chief Brown will update the council later when we get closer to the Budget Amendment 6 item, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, second slide, please, Taylor. All right, so I feel like we finally have a little bit of good news to report. We are slowly seeing more counties come out of high transmission. The positivity rate is down. The vaccinations are still going ever slowly up, and COVID-like illness is down, and hospitalizations are also down, although they're still pretty high. So we're still seeing about 40 people per day go into the hospital for COVID-like illness in the county, but that is down from nearly 50 per day a week or so ago. So trending in the right direction there. Next slide, please, Taylor. And just to confirm that, I always like this 7-day average picture because it gives you just a quick snapshot of where that line is, and you'll see that we are trending downward in Salt Lake City specifically over the last 7 days. Next slide, Taylor. Here's the vaccination stats that we bring you each week, and you'll see that overall, while each zip code is still kind of just inching upward very slowly, the overall vaccination rate is getting a little bit closer to 70%. So still going in the right direction, just slow. I think one more slide on COVID. Oh, no, so that's it. Any questions on the COVID update or any information you want to see going forward that we can add, council members?
Doesn't look like it from this side.
Okay, so last week we started showing you this community engagement update slide, and this hasn't changed significantly, but just wanted to draw your attention to a few of the things that are coming to a close in terms of opportunity for the public to engage. So the first two on the 11th East Reconstruction and the Pioneer Park Vision are closing here in the next few days. There is a live Q&A session on February 16th at 9 a.m. on the affordable housing overlay. So that is something that a lot of people have been interested in, and welcome you to join that. I can pop the link in the chat here actually after I get finished here. Then the Thriving in Place is what we're calling the gentrification or anti-displacement study that we're doing. So we're looking to launch a survey into the public on that by the end of the week. And a few other items there that we flashed up on the screen last time. And then just in case anybody missed it, on the next slide, I will again pop up that general link for all of the potential opportunities for the public to engage via slc.gov/feedback. So I think that's it for me, unless there are any questions.
Any questions for Rachel? I don't see any more questions. Thank you very much, Rachel.
Thanks. I'll hand it over to Andrew for his regular update.
Thank you. Council members, this is the Resource Center and Overflow occupancy numbers from the last week. The total column on the right is slightly up from the previous discussion we had from 96 last time to just under 98% capacity in the resource centers. And St. Vincent de Paul is running at 61 per night, and the Weekend Center averaging 26 per night. Next slide. The two large abatements are planned the next 2 weeks in the city. We have a limited number of large camps, but two of them will be addressed this week and next. And then as well, probably some smaller cleanings simultaneous to those. A resource fair was held at the North Temple High Needs Motel, formerly the Ramada, last Friday. And you can see some of the partners that were there, Rough Haven, the courts, etc. Sacred Circle and the State Court Help Desk are two new ones that were there this time, which is very helpful. Sacred Circle runs a couple of clinics in town, including one at Pamela's Place, one of the permanent supportive housing developments that was open this year. And then Utah Transit Authority, that's an association, should be authority, continues to join with us in bus passes and a new survey of those who are unsheltered or in the Ramada. And right now we're in the free fare February, but this is helpful going forward to figure out more transportation options for folks without vehicles. Next slide. Slight change on this one as we get through. You'll notice St. Vincent de Paul is open nightly, and the scattered motel rooms are still operating as usual. The High Needs Temporary Housing Program, formerly Ramada Inn Motel Rooms, is still operating, and they've gone up to 116 beds filled from our last discussion at 90. And then we said the second piece of that building, the Ramada, are the conference rooms. And they're planning on opening the larger one tonight at starting at 11 p.m. until 6:30 a.m. There will be an additional shuttle added to the regular 2 shuttles that are going around, so 3 shuttles that will run between the Ramada and the Weekend Center at St. Vincent de Paul downtown. So folks staying in those overnight beds in the conference rooms can go from downtown out there at night, and then from there back to meals and services at the Weekend Center during the day. The change is that the Weekend Center is going to have to cease to operate as an overflow starting tomorrow, I believe. And I have a short statement the Shelter of the Homeless is, that the Salt Lake Valley Coalition to End Homelessness is putting out as we speak, detailing this a little bit. If I could read just a portion of it for you all. February 15th, 2022, nightly beds will be available starting tonight through April 15th at the former Ramada Inn to those experiencing homelessness. Additionally, after tonight, February 15th, overflow services at the Weekend Center, operated by Volunteers of America, will close. Together, VOA and the Road Home will consolidate staff and resources to provide 45 overflow shelter beds at the former Ramada Inn. This transition is a continuation of our collective efforts to provide consistent and safe shelter to those in need during the winter months. We remain committed to responding to the needs of those who are unsheltered and being flexible and responsible as a system. We are assessing overflow needs in our community, and our ability to expand capacity, we have space to open 24 additional beds in the Ramada if needed and feasible. The Wiegand Center served a critical role in providing safe and overflow beds to those experiencing homelessness during the first months of winter. We are grateful to all the providers and funders who helped open this much needed resource and continue to support our consolidated efforts at the former Ramada Inn. And at the bottom, you'll see that the best way to access emergency shelter beds is still the 801-990-9999 number. And so for folks who are joining now or may ask these your council members or others, the Wiegand Center will be open tonight with those 35 beds. But then starting tomorrow, it won't be open at night. St. Vincent de Paul will continue to be open every night. And the Ramada will have another 45 beds for first come, first serve at night as well. And transportation is going from the Rio Grande area, from the Wiegand Center, to the Ramada and back every night and every morning. So folks can get there fairly easily, we hope. Are there questions from the council? A lot of this information is new as of about an hour and a half ago, so a lot of folks are still digesting it, including you all probably. So I can understand if there'll be questions now or later on. I'm happy to follow up and answer any.
So, Andrew, just a quick question. So the Wiegand Center, tomorrow night, people who are normally going to the Wiegand Center will be going to St. Paul, Vincent de Paul, or the Ramada from here on out?
Yes, Mr. Chair. And the funding and plans are in place to have those open until April 15th, as it happens every year. So another 2 months or so.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the council members on the closure of the Wiegand Center or other questions?
I have a question. Andrew, so the reason why they're closing the Wiegand Center is because there's no more need. Is the reason why they're closing the Wiegand Center is because there's no more need for that to be open or they run out of funds? Why are they closing it?
It's primarily a lack of staffing, council member Valdemoros. They've been struggling for a bit and utilizing other staff at VOA to cover overtime shifts for that center to keep it open, and it's just not feasible. So it made more sense for them to consolidate with the road home at the Ramada. They can add more beds more easily out there and scale up more quickly.
Thank you. And then another question is, as the legislature session is going on right now, is there any information that you can give us or like a brief something of what's going on with that? Because we're looking at housing allocations or funding, but also the lingering question to me about having the resource fairs that you're having. The constituency saying still there's a lot of people out there without housing. Even when we have offered housing or going to a shelter to people experiencing homelessness, we get turned down. I've been turned down many, many, many times. To me, the lingering question is always mental health issues right now and maybe associated with drug addiction. Is there anything that we're doing that we're keeping tally of how many people are telling us no to the resources that we have in our city and that we're not being able to help them? And is there anything else that we should be thinking about on how to help these folks? And maybe the legislature is doing something about mental health. I don't know. Is there any information about that? Because I feel like we do this every week and we kind of know the numbers and we kind of know what the issues are, but we still have lingering questions. Like we still have people that do not want to take us up on resources.
So it sounded like you had a question about, are we tracking individuals who are saying no to resources?
Yes. Let's start.
There is a by name list that's shared by providers, both outreach and shelter operators in the system to identify individual needs. There's also a separate list we've talked about high utilizers that tend to go through the jail and the courts, and we're working with the county on that list as well. So the by name list is critical, council member, about identifying their individuals and their unique needs, because a lot of them have a wide variety of issues. As far as the resources, there aren't enough resources, I think, fundamentally, number one. So housing is a good example of this, where there's actually more vouchers than units right now, and the housing authorities are trying to find places where people can use vouchers to get into housing. There's just not housing units. So that's the reality. For substance use treatment beds, there are more beds than we've had in previous years, but for mental health, there's still a lack of resources as well. So from a state legislative perspective on those two issues, I am aware of some work being done on the mental health side statewide, both an assessment of need at a state level, which I think I personally would believe that it would show that there's a lack of resource sufficient to cover everything we need to do. And then the second piece is also the right housing for the right needs. And so we know some folks are going to gravitate towards a tiny home village who are going to be fairly independent in that sort of situation. Daily life skills, they can handle those things. We also know that there's a fair percentage of folks both in the resource centers and on the street right now who suffer from severe mental illness. And they're going to need a different level of housing than we currently have in the quantities we need it. So the state legislative ask for $128 million for deeply affordable housing is pretty flexible. And Wayne Eater out through the state's been intentionally trying to talk through that it could be used for a whole variety of types of housing, including the stuff that you're talking about for mental illness. We also just need general support for folks who are struggling in and out of housing with mental illness. One example we found with the high utilizer list downtown, your area, council member, is we have a few 20 people or so who are seeing police multiple times per week sometimes, or daily almost. And sometimes they're being arrested, sometimes cited, sometimes they're actually going to jail and leaving very quickly for misdemeanor level offenses. And so that's that coordination with the jail and the courts, and then all the other service provision to figure out a different interaction. When we've gone through a by name list for that group, we found so far at least 3 people probably have severe head trauma, in the sense that it's not something you have therapy for necessarily and become independent again, or have a medication regimen that helps you regain some functioning. They may be permanently impaired. There's just not a way to get them into services right now. There's a waiting list of about 2,000 people for that need at the state level. We have a fair number of other folks in that list that I saw that at times have been perpetrators of crime, and almost equal number of times have been the victim of a crime. They're sort of in the cycle of how do you tell a good person from a bad person, because they're experiencing both sides. So yes, there's a lot of work that the system needs to do to fund and get the right resources to the right people in the right place. That is happening, and I can't really speak to the specific bills at this point. I think a lot of them have yet to be drafted that I've seen, but I trust that the city legislative teams and lobbying teams are working and tracking those pretty closely. I'm sure an update would be helpful.
Thank you. And if you know anything, I'm happy to advocate. I did put it in my request to the mayor and priorities list for this year that she would let us know, or at least let me know, to advocate from the city with for mental health resources, because I think that's the one thing that we're missing in this puzzle that we're trying to solve and help people experiencing homelessness. So I'm happy to be out there and advocating for the city. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Valdemoros. We appreciate that.
Any other questions for Andrew? Thank you for that briefing, Andrew, and those responses. Appreciate it. Are we on to Lisa or Chief Brown?
I don't actually have any updates, and I think Chief Brown was going to give his update during the BA6 conversation. Is that right, Chief? Right.
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Hold on a second, Chief. Okay, the Chief will do his later. Okay, gotcha. Thank you very much. Rachel, anything else from the admin side?
Nothing else from us for now. Thank you.
And thank you very much for always engaging with us. Appreciate it. We'll move on to item number 2, which is the equity update. And we have no update for this evening. We'll probably get another update on our next meeting. Item number 3 is the rezone and master plan amendment for 1583 East Stratford Avenue.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I need to recuse myself from this item.
Recused.
Thank you.
We'll call you back. Thanks, Councilmember Mono. And today at the table, we have Brian Fulmer from the council office and Nanette Larson, the senior planner. Brian, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a proposal to amend the zoning map and master plan future land use map for the property. The current zoning is RMF 45, which is moderate density multifamily, and the proposed zoning designation is CN, or neighborhood commercial. Under the proposal, the Sugar House master plan future land use map for the property would change from medium density residential to neighborhood business. Planning staff recommended and the Planning Commission forwarded a unanimous negative recommendation to the City Council. That is my intro, and I will now turn it over to Nan Larson.
Thank you, Brian. I have a presentation. If I'm able to share, or Taylor, if you're able to share. Okay, great. Okay, let's go to the first slide, Taylor. So the planning department has received a request from Aaron Hoffman with Stratford Investment Properties for an amendment to the Sugar House master plan and zoning map for the property located at 1583 East Stratford Avenue at the intersection of Stratford and Glenmere Avenues. The amendments proposed are for a potential redevelopment of the site that would allow for a mixed-use development that includes office space and would retain the 6 residential units on the site. The site is currently occupied by a multifamily condominium structure with 6 residential units that front on Stratford Avenue. Parking is located towards the rear of the site. Next slide. Currently, the property is located in the RMF 35 district, or the moderate density multifamily residential district. The applicant is proposing to rezone the site to CN, or neighborhood commercial. The majority of the surrounding properties around the subject site are zoned for single-family residences. The intersection of Stratford and Glenmere Avenues includes a commercial node, as well as other multifamily residences. And next slide. The site is also located in the Sugar House master plan, where it's designated as medium density residential. The proposed amendments would change this future land use designation to neighborhood business. There are other neighborhood business designations at the Stratford-Glenmere intersection, as well as other medium density residential designations. And next slide. Because the requested rezone would change the district from a residential to a commercial district, there are a number of different standards between the 2 districts. Different setbacks between the RMF 35 and CN districts are required. The existing building meets all of these required setbacks, except the maximum front yard setback, where the structure is set back 27 feet and the required is up to 25 feet. If the rezone were approved, it would create a legal non-compliant structure as to the standards of the CN district. The permitted building height in the CN district is limited to 25 feet. The existing multifamily structure meets this standard. There will be different landscaping buffers between the 2 zoning districts under consideration. And finally, because the current district is residential and the proposed district is commercial, there are many other uses that are permitted in the CN district that would not be permitted in the RMF district. However, because neighborhood commercial is intended to be located near residential housing and therefore allows low intensity commercial uses that serve residential neighborhoods. Mixed use is a permitted use in the proposed CN zone. This includes residential, commercial, or office all on the same property. And next slide. The applicable master plans that this site is located in is the Sugar House Master Plan, Growing SLC, and Plan Salt Lake. The Sugar House Master Plan includes language that discourages the expansion of non-residential land uses into areas of medium density residential. It encourages increasing opportunities for affordable housing. The intersection of Stratford and Glenmere Avenues are also identified in this plan as a commercial node. Growing SLC in Plan Salt Lake also includes statements of the importance of ensuring affordable housing is available citywide. Also growing SLC and Plan Salt Lake emphasizes the importance of life cycle housing types, which is providing different housing types for different life stages throughout all the neighborhoods in Salt Lake City. Initially, when the amendments went to Planning Commission on March 24th of last year, staff had recommended the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of denial to the City Council, as the proposal didn't include retaining the 6 residential units on the site, and it would redevelop the site to only office use. The Planning Commission did forward a recommendation of denial of the master plan and zoning amendments without much discussion on their decision. After the public hearing, staff continued to work with the applicant to change their request. The updated request includes keeping the 6 residential units currently on the site and creating a mixed-use development that includes residential and office. With these project updates, where the 6 residential units will remain on the site and be part of a mixed-use redevelopment, it appears the proposal does meet the intent of the applicable master plans and the purpose statement of the zoning ordinance. And the last slide, please, Taylor. I'm available for any questions the council may have for me. And Brian Scott, who is a representative of the applicant, I believe is also prepared to speak.
Council members, are there any questions for Nanette? Nanette, could you make that last statement? The current development has changed some plans on that, and they would be matching the vision of the master plans. Could you kind of restate that?
Yeah, absolutely. So initially, when this project first went to Planning Commission and when staff wrote the Planning Commission staff report, the project was proposing to eliminate all 6 residential units and convert the site or redevelop the site to an office use only, which is permitted in the CN district. After the unanimous decision at Planning Commission to recommend denial was forwarded to the council, the applicant changed their submittal and they are willing to agree to an agreement with the city to keep those 6 residential units on the site. And so the site would be redeveloped to a mixed use with residential and office. And with those 6 residential units being retained, it's staff's opinion that it does meet the intent of the CN district, and it meets the intent in the language of Plan Salt Lake, growing SLC, and the Sugar House Master Plan.
Thank you. Now, if this developer was to sell this property to another developer, would that, how does that transfer so that 6 housing units stays on that lot?
So as part of the amendments, there would need to be a development agreement, is generally what the city's done in the past. So it would be, if the council chooses to approve those amendments, it would be an approval with a condition that those 6 residential units are retained on the site. And with that condition, a development agreement would be created. And that development agreement is tied to the property.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Wharton.
I know that normally we don't have to send this back to the Planning Commission, but wouldn't we, in a situation like this, normally do that? So, given the amount of change, it changes the project from being, contemplated by the master plan or from not being contemplated by the master plan to being contemplated. Wouldn't we normally send that back to the Planning Commission to get feedback on?
The attorney's office can give us more insight about that. My experience is that in the cases where it's becoming more compliant, you wouldn't necessarily need to send it back. If it became much less compliant or less compliant at all, then you might send it back. So that's a judgment you have to make with the attorney's advice.
Cindy, I'm here. This is Paul Nielsen, if you want me to weigh in. Yeah. Sorry, can you hear me?
I'm not sure who's talking.
Sorry, this is Paul Nielsen. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Go ahead, Paul.
All right, thank you. To the extent that you do want me to weigh in, I think it's perfectly fine for the council to consider this this petition, even though it has changed. The state code really only discusses the city council taking action on a planning commission recommendation in the form of an approval, a denial, or an approval with changes. And there's nothing in state code that dictates that an applicant can't change that petition along the way. So that they're somewhere in between. So that's perfectly fine. Certainly it's your prerogative to send it back to the planning commission if you want, but under state law, it's not necessary.
Follow-up question then. Thanks. So I'm having a hard time finding the summary of the discussion at the Planning Commission, but I think in the presentation it was said that there wasn't a lot of discussion, that the Planning Commission just voted it down. Is there, I guess in that discussion, was there any indication that if the units were saved, that this would change the Planning Commission's recommendation or anything like that? I guess I'm just worried about that there's this change that was made, but we haven't had the benefit of the Planning Commission input since this change was made. And I know we don't have to send it back, but I'm just wondering if that's normal for something like this. For some reason, I had in my head that it was. Thank you.
So you're right. There's not a lot of minutes on the item because there was actually no discussion from the Planning Commission. My recollection of the meeting was staff presented and there was a question whether there was any questions or comments. There were no comments and they went straight to a vote.
Are there other further questions for Nanette?
I just wanted to note some of the council staff considerations on this issue. Master plan and some of the issues that, we are seeing with this project and some of the conflict with it. And, it is hard for me to not listen to, not hear the Planning Commission after all these changes. And just the fact that this is not matching with the overall plan that we already designed for this area. This is happening a lot in the west side right now where projects are not matching with the master plan or the plan for the specific area, and that is a very big problem for me.
I have one more comment, but I'll let sorry, go ahead.
That's okay, Mr. Chair, if I may. The current condos that are there are what we would probably consider naturally occurring, right? Like they're actually affordable in Sugar House.
Yeah, they would be considered naturally occurring, affordable, or at the very least attainable housing, right?
And even the new plan, though, my understanding is it wouldn't, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that it wouldn't necessarily save the already existing structure, and if it did, it would remodel it such that I'm just assuming that it would not necessarily then be affordable. And maybe that's a question for the applicant afterwards, and we can put a pin in that, unless somebody has an answer now.
The condition that would be needed on the approval of the amendments would be to retain those 6 housing units, but it doesn't necessarily speak to retaining the structure and the configuration of those 6 housing units. So to demolish that building and rebuild with 6 residential units that are a lot more expensive is possible, but it's up to the discretion of the property owner. Technically, that's what they would be able to do under the existing zoning district that they have right now, the RMF 35. They could demolish and rebuild with those same units, just as they could if the rezone was approved with a condition of approval.
And do you know if any of the current condos are occupied by residents?
I'm not certain. Right now, I know that it is owned by the applicant, the entity that the applicant's representing. I think the applicant would be able to speak towards that, though.
Okay, I will wait. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we turn the time over to the developer, Brian Scott? Thank you, Brian. We usually give applicants 5 minutes to speak, and the time is yours.
Great. Thank you very much for you guys' time. So I'm an architect with Raw Design. We're representing the client, who's Aaron Hoffman, is the owner of the lot. And just to give you a little bit of context and kind of a timeline. So Aaron owns the building across the street from this location. It's their current office. It's currently zoned for CN, and that's where they work out of. It's it's kind of an engineering / medical firm. They produce prosthetic limbs and things like that. And his business is growing, and so he's trying to look for more space. He went through this process and originally wanted to just put in different units there, and that got voted down. And that was back in, I believe March of last year. It was almost a full year ago. And after that, he kind of received the feedback from the planning staff and got voted down, he came and retained us to kind of come up with a solution, to look at all that and come up with a solution that would satisfy that and work. And so we came on in July, a few months after the previous previous application went through and failed. And basically we looked at it and tried to figure out how we could satisfy, all of those concerns that came up from planning and still help him grow his business in place and get him the office space that he's hoping for. A couple things, just in response to some of the questions. Our plan is to keep the 6 units as they are and to build a separate building back behind it that would be the office space. And basically, right now there's the apartment buildings and then a large parking lot behind it. And what we're looking at doing is having the parking underground and putting an office building behind. So we are planning to keep the 6 units, to keep the 6 affordable units. Oh. Well, if it comes to me, I'll bring it back up, but I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have or anything.
Thank you, Brian. I think we have a Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Brian. So I guess you may know better. Are those 6 units currently being occupied, and would it be anticipated that they would just stay in those condos?
I can't say for certain. I believe when I went and toured, they were occupied a few back then. So I think that the upper ones are. I know that at least some of them are, and I believe the intent is to keep them as they are, and yeah, just kind of keep them in place and keep them occupied.
Okay.
The one change that we are looking at doing that would affect that building is currently they're accessed from a kind of old staircase that's behind the building that just switchbacks up, and we'd be replacing that with an elevator and then a new staircase, so that now there would be elevator access to the upper apartments.
Okay. And then what's anticipated for sort of parking mitigation with the office building? It sounds like the intent behind the property owner is to expand because their business was expanding, which means more traffic in that area, which, believe me, I already get enough emails about. So traffic and parking. So is there a mitigation plan or idea on what parking and traffic would look like if this were to go through and if the businesses were to expand?
Yeah, so we've kind of looked at what our layout would be and planned it out, and what we're looking at does work in terms of the parking requirements for CN. I think, I mean, at the legislative level, when you switch from CN to RMF, the units only require 1 unit or 1 parking stall instead of 2, but that's obviously not, applicable to the outside world. It's just a change in name. So we are adding, with moving the parking down underground, we would be adding some units. And then probably the biggest thing is that the parking will be shared parking between the 2 spaces. And so there's kind of synergy between the times that different people are using those spaces. So, and there's provisions in the code for that and for kind of reducing parking based on it being shared. So as people leave in the morning and they go to their jobs, the other people come in and park and then work there. And then when they leave, other people are coming back. And so it's kind of, it's a more dense use of parking. But yeah, if that makes sense.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions this time? I feel like we've had a number of questions and concerns. I was thinking about taking a straw poll on sending this back to the Planning Commission for their review again, so that we can iron out the concerns we have at that level. So,
Mr. Chair, it feels like this is a little...
sorry. I was wondering who's talking.
It feels a little difficult to ask anyone to undertake this when really what this is pointing to is trying to operate in a nebulous zone when we don't have things like a housing loss mitigation ordinance that really would make guiding these decisions more concrete. And I know no developer wants to hear, wait on another ordinance, but I mean, it still feels like if we send it back, are we sending it back with nebulous kind of not concrete instructions as to what exactly would make this doable for us?
Well, I'm thinking that the plan changed, so send it back to planning to look at the new plan to see how that works as far as the balance between the change and the master plans. Councilmember Wharton.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So I would make that straw poll, and my reason for doing that is just that I think it's really beneficial for us to have that feedback from people on the Planning Commission, and I like to know not only what their thoughts are, but how they respond or what their response is to public feedback. And I think that's normally part of our process. I think it's beneficial for us to have that information when we make these decisions. So for me, I would benefit from knowing what Planning Commission's input is before I vote on this. So I would propose that we send it back.
So I have a straw poll on the table.
And I second that.
And a second straw poll from Councilmember Wharton.
No?
Yeah. Are there any questions about the straw poll? Okay, everyone give me a thumbs up if you're in favor of the straw poll. Send it back to the Planning Commission, and that is a unanimous straw poll on that, so we'll send it back to the Planning Commission with Councilmember Mono recused.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. Annette, appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
And we'll move on to item number 4, and we'll get Councilmember Mono back here on the Pioneer Park Improvement Project Update and Conceptual Design. At the table, or on the screen, we have Allison Rowland from the Council Office, Kristen Riker, the Director of Public Lands, Catherine Moss, Planner, Anna Laybourne from the Principal Design Workshop, and Sean Fife from City Architect. Allison, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned, oh, I'm sorry, I can't tell if Councilmember Mono is back. Did I go ahead?
He's in the room.
Okay, excellent. So this is an informational briefing, a Pioneer Park Improvements Project Update and Conceptual Design. I'm going to give a very brief introduction so that you can spend maximum time speaking to the people who know these things in detail. But I do want to mention that this is work that's being led by Public Lands Department under Kristen Riker's directorshipness, and with help from the engineering division, which is why Scott is here, and the consultants from Design Workshop, which is why Anna is here. This is a process that began in early 2021, so it's been going on close to a year now. The total cost of these improvements outlined in the conceptual design was preliminarily estimated at about $20 million, and that would include allowances for inflation. Of course, it's very early at this point to do that kind of estimation, but as the budget authority, we always like to give you that information to the extent it's available. Funding possibilities for these improvements would include impact fees, sales tax or general obligation bond, which, as you know, the administration is considering these mechanisms. And then, as you also no doubt know, there was a request for appropriation from the state legislature by a community group. So those 3 options are on the table at this point. And that is basically, I'll just talk about that kind of stuff and let the others talk about the more fun stuff.
Thank you, Allison. I just want to make sure Anna Laybourne, our consultant, has access. Oh, yep, she's in. Excellent. So we will go ahead and pull up our presentation. We have about a 20-minute presentation, and we want to leave plenty of time for you guys, the council members, to ask questions. So let me just start by saying thank you for giving us this time to present to the council to discuss Pioneer Park, your downtown park vision plan. Hopefully you've had a chance to review some of the materials, including the 2-minute video that was part of those materials that we forwarded, and the proposed improvements that it includes. So next slide. Today, I'm I'm so pleased to have the project team provide insight into why improvements are needed to Pioneer Park, how the community shaped this plan, what inspires the vision plan, why it should be implemented, and what the next steps will be. First, I want to provide some background about why Pioneer Park is a city priority and what current park challenges the vision plan improvements address. And we'll start with a little history here. Pioneer Park is the city's oldest park and has served as a gathering place, a place of rest, a fort, and provided various recreation opportunities that responded to interests of the era. Over the last 150 years, the neighborhood has gone through a number of transitions and now is seeing a resurgence of new urban residents. This slide is from the 2019 Public Lands Needs Assessment. And from that assessment, we know that the downtown and central community neighborhoods are the high needs areas and have the fastest population growth rates, highest park needs based on population characteristics, and the lowest level of park service per resident. In fact, currently in the city, Public Lands provides an average level of service of 3.5 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents and 8.6 acres of natural land per 1,000 residents. That's for the whole city. And then when you look at the downtown and the central area, that number is 2.8 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents and 0.0 acres of city-owned natural lands with no direct access to surrounding natural areas. Additionally, this park needs to be a place for the over 37,000 employees that work within walking distance of the park. The acres of parks we do have in this area have a larger weight to carry and should be designed to encourage use and accommodate many different needs. Pioneer Park is the only community-sized park in downtown Salt Lake City, serving immediate downtown residents seeking recreation and green space, regional events, and visitors. When we zoom into this 15-minute walk area around the property, we're left with 0.002 acres of park space per resident. As all of you know, downtown is redeveloping rapidly. We estimated another 1,000 new housing units are either under construction or planned within a 15-minute walk of Pioneer Park. The Public Lands Draft Master Plan Reimagine Nature engaged over 12,000 people to understand their priorities, and adding parks, recreation, and green space to downtown was one of the 10 priority projects identified. Pioneer Park is identified in the plan for a near-term investment project. Public Lands has explored opportunities to acquire additional park acres in the downtown area, but it's really difficult and challenging due to the cost per acre, availability, and appropriateness of space for a park location. For this reason, the draft Reimagine Nature Master Plan looks to creative opportunities to utilize existing public properties in the downtown areas, including the creation of linear parks in our wide downtown streets. Finally, I think this will not be a surprise to any of you, but Reimagine Nature also identifies some of the complex societal issues that involve our parks, such as environmental health and climate threats, equity and inclusion, maintenance and stewardship, civic pride and community connection, and homelessness. Pioneer Park is an opportunity to demonstrate how our city seeks solutions. Although Pioneer Park everyday use is increasing, in the survey that we did, residents stated that they are not satisfied with the current conditions. The 10-acre park is predominantly open lawn with large mature trees scattered throughout. The park has a multi-use field, tennis courts, playground, basketball court, and an off-leash dog park, some of which were built in the mid-1980s and others in 2005. Currently, there's no restrooms in the park. And This is in part why in 2019, the Salt Lake City Council approved a budget amendment to designate $3.4 million to Pioneer Park as a way to begin addressing this deficit in park service for downtown residents. In 2001, a consultant team was selected through a competitive bid process to create a vision plan, public engagement, and construction documents. In a moment, we will introduce Anna Laybourne from the consulting firm Design Workshop, an international practicing landscape architecture and planning firm with extensive experience reinvigorating urban parks. The Pioneer Park, Your Downtown Park Vision Plan, provides the opportunity to begin addressing these immediate needs for more recreation options and a desirable outdoor space in downtown right now. Now I'll turn it over to Public Lands Planner, Kat Moss, who will give you an overview of the vision plan process.
Great, thank you, Kristen, and thank you all for your time. I am really excited to share this with you all today. So right now we are in the final step in a series of engagement opportunities for the vision plan, which began in April of 2021, when we met with area businesses, key stakeholders, and participants from past planning efforts to kick off the process. Then this summer, with engagement coordinated by David Evans and Associates, we participated in a series of in-person events at the park to survey park patrons and gather their input on the park. And then that same survey was distributed online, and we heard from nearly 3,000 participants in person and online about how the park should be used. And this amount of input and the representation we got from a diversity of park users greatly exceeded the project goals and typical engagement. So from that engagement window, we were able to quantify that 51% of survey respondents were either extremely or somewhat dissatisfied with the current status of the park, while just 2% of respondents said that they were extremely satisfied. So across both in-person and online comments, we also kind of heard that the public really appreciated exploring ideas that would help this park live up to its potential. And then the online and in-person engagements both explored a long list of potential elements to add to the park to understand what would be the most popular. And overwhelmingly, conserving trees and adding to them with more diverse and water-conscious plant material was one of the public's highest priorities. Some other key takeaways from the 3,000 people that provided input were that there is great public support for adding a pavilion, food and beverage stand, dining space, a restroom, lighting, water features, and then replacing the active play and sports elements currently in the park. So then this fall and continuing throughout the planning process, we met with area stakeholders such as the Downtown Alliance, Farmers Market, local businesses, Salt Lake City Police Department, and homeless services providers to ensure that this vision plan meets the needs of all types of park users. And then refinements to the plan have been made, and now we are sharing this vision plan with you and with the broader public. And we held a virtual public open house on February 2nd to share this vision plan, which the video recording of that now has around 1,000 views. So from a park audit, which was conducted with community members and key stakeholders, such as maintenance staff, police, and surrounding property owners, in addition to the survey, we learned that the park is frequented by people exercising, taking a break in the shade of the trees, and also taking their dogs out for a walk, although many of the current park features don't fully meet the needs of these users. And just to note, smaller investments have been made over time. These efforts have taken a phased approach, but have kind of lacked a full vision to strategically solve some of the very challenges that we've been facing in this park. And much of the time, this park is underutilized and does not attract many nearby residents and workers to spend time in this space, even though it is one of the only park spaces in downtown. The playground, the volleyball, and the sports courts are all over 20 years old, which is really the expiration timeline for these sorts of features. And then the farmers market hosted in the park on Saturdays definitely continues to be a very popular attraction. However, shade, seating, and other comforts are important considerations to make in order to make this space a little bit more enjoyable. So then finally, the second survey for this project opened on January 20th of this year, and the public has until February 18th to submit feedback. And the purpose of this survey is to really test the support of the vision plan and gather thoughts about priorities for the first phase of investment. And so far, we've received around 900 responses. And while these are preliminary results, they are showing strong support for the vision plan, as well as providing some helpful suggestions for what to modify as we move into phases of detailed design. So now I'm pleased to introduce Anna Laybourne from our Consultants Design Workshop, and she will go into the vision plan elements a bit.
It really is a pleasure to share this with you today. The 2-minute vision video on the website briefly provides the highlights of this plan, describing the tree-filled urban oasis and new features for recreation, gathering, and relaxing outdoors. But to give more insight into the thinking of this plan, we start by sharing the points of inspiration and new study findings, the framework for the design thinking, our physical features proposed in this vision plan, and also other aspects about the overall experience support. The park brings together findings and inspiration from a variety of sources, including studying past improvements, previous public input, plans and studies of the park, a newly completed cultural landscape report for the park that studies the history of the site. It provides recommendations for how to maintain the integrity and interpret the history, such as maintaining it as an open green space and recognizing it has been both refuge open to everyone and a place for gathering and activity. As Kat mentioned, in the past year, a site assessment and public input have been collected that are directing this concept. We studied the changes and opportunities in downtown to understand who currently lives, works, plays, and visits downtown Salt Lake City, and what to anticipate for planning for its future. The park design is also informed by referencing contemporary best practices for urban park design throughout the country. Studying other urban parks, we know that the renaissance of downtowns has people coming to expect a high level of investment in their downtown parks. This is who you're competing with. It's not uncommon for historic park remodels to range in price of $60 to $75 per square foot. The full scope of capital improvements detailed in Pioneer Park Vision Plan, including improvements to the adjacent streets, adding transit stop and more, is estimated to be about $46 per square foot. In addition, there are many logistics to sort out operating a park with these features. And the next steps will also estimate costs for the first phase of maintenance, staff to coordinate or host activities and events, concession agreements, and other services. So we want to emphasize that the project design is influenced by all these points of new input that shape the crafting of project guiding principles. Pioneer Park should be the heart of the city, a commons that connects people to our urban center, a model for urban ecology, a green space that responds to our climate challenges, balancing neighborhood and regional needs, a park that supports everyday activities and active lifestyles while being a signature park that hosts city-wide events, welcoming for everyone, an inviting space for all abilities, incomes, age, genders, and cultures, a safe and well-maintained space, a park with cutting-edge solutions to address common urban park conflicts, and recognizes that stewardship and ongoing care is needed. And finally, a lasting legacy, a place that expresses the layered history and provides value to future generations. The concept layout in the vision plan is shaped by both key views and people's circulation patterns. Pioneer Plaza will open up to the north edge of the park, providing a new plaza a space to better support events, social gatherings, and host activities. The multipurpose field, the newest addition to Pioneer Park, will remain the focus of the southern portion of the park, with other sports court additions flanking it. With public comments so heavily focused on desiring nature in the park and also community gathering spaces, I'll highlight those features first. Feedback gleaned from the community engagement showed a large desire for these passive natural elements, taking into consideration biodiversity as well as our arid climate. There are also lots of studies that show biodiversity improves mental health, and also research that proves that interesting landscapes help reduce crime. The Cultural Landscape Report maintains that a gathering space, trees, and grass were some of the elements with historic integrity and were important to include in the new vision plan. So our landscape designers gave critical thought to plant selection, but also preserving the existing trees. Design team intentionally reduced impacts to existing trees, preserving 85% of the existing tree count and adding roughly 90 trees to increase the current tree canopy by 29%. The project team worked with the Salt Lake City urban forester to assess the health of the existing trees to identify those that are unhealthy or approaching the end of their life and may be replaced in different locations. Salt Lake City Public Lands has committed to replacing more trees in the park than are removed. The new park will add enhanced pockets of native plants, especially along the garden walk and tree groves. The park includes a series of garden experiences to connect. The newly planted vegetation will be ready for Salt Lake City's changing temperatures and drought, as well as improved ecological systems with pollinator plants introduced. The Signature Pavilion will be a new iconic feature of downtown. So imagine a stage, cafe, restrooms, and kiosks for the Salt Lake City's new park rangers all in one place. These are the types of amenities in downtown parks throughout the country proven to reduce safety concerns and promote civic life. Events such as performances and marketplaces are better supported with the pavilion and other flexible infrastructure for seamless integration. I'm also excited to share the source, an interactive mist feature will anchor the plaza. The mist will provide a cooling effect on a hot summer day, a point of interest, and also is mindful of Utah's arid climate. It's one reason we ruled out fountains or water spray features that were highly desired by the public. But a mist feature can extend into other seasons as a visual attraction, with the sculpture's beautiful lights brightening cold winter nights. The Downtown Farmers Market is a well-loved event by residents and visitors alike. So it's critical that successful events can continue in and near the park. In addition to consulting with the Downtown Alliance and the Farmers Market several times to refine the project concepts to incorporate the market's needs and providing additional activation, the team is taking great care to not inhibit the configuration of booths for the market and other events, including with the tree placement. So you can see on the screen the booth placement and circulation for the farmers market events. And in the implementation of this vision plan, there only needs to be a slight reconfiguration of circulation routes for establishing young trees. So this concept maintains the market path around the perimeter of the park and provides space for the same or more stalls as the peak at the farmers market prior to COVID. It also includes comforts improvements such as seating, more shade, and restrooms, which will improve patron experiences. Careful selection of features for recreation and activity is imperative to the park's success. To not waste investment on features that won't be popular with your downtown residents and workforce, and also selection of those that meet diverse needs and encourage a balance of activity and places for relaxation throughout the day. This selection is informed by local recreation trends and national research on what makes for compelling and welcoming parks that draw diverse people to spend time there, no matter what season or time of day. And we asked people widely through our polling sessions that Kat mentioned, what were their visions and dreams, making them think larger than what they have today, looking for what are the most popular items that they selected for inclusion in this selection. So that include replacement of the basketball court and replacement of the playground to one that is for all ages, including a fitness circuit. A true dog park is a real opportunity to create an attraction that is also a community gathering space. The plan currently includes space for multiple pickleball courts, as the existing tennis court ranked much lower in the surveys as an element to retain. Lastly, inclusion, safety, and design for dignity for our community members experiencing homelessness was also an emphatic request from the public input. Improved safety and maintenance will be addressed through a number of strategies, including the park ranger station and restroom design. The vision is inclusionary, rather than removing, excluding people, or creating an overbearing security presence. The City Public Lands Department has been coordinating with homeless service providers to vet design improvements and park management with this goal in mind. We have discussed future partnerships that encourage a message of encouraging coexistence in the park, such as with the example of park volunteers and staffing a community cart that encourages interactions of people of differing backgrounds. Transforming Pioneer Park will bring it up to the level of expectations of downtown parks throughout the country and expectations of our city's residents. It will truly be your downtown park. And Sean's going to talk about next steps.
Good afternoon, everyone, and we really appreciate your time today. As far as next steps are concerned, the project team is excited to be sharing the vision plan now and looking forward to reviewing final feedback from the public later this month. Public input in this phase asks for prioritization by groups of amenities we think make sense for implementation together, and public feedback will help identify the priority items to be implemented in phase 1 and based on available funding. As mentioned previously, the full vision plan cost estimate for construction is currently at $20 million. We currently have $3.4 million in impact fees dedicated to the project. There are 2 other potential funding sources I'm sure everyone's well aware of. There's the bond, the city's community reinvestment bond. This bond is currently under consideration by administration, and Public Lands is recommending an additional $5 million investment for Pioneer Park. There is also the Pioneer Park Coalition's request to the state for an additional $15 million in funding. As I understand it, there's about $5 million earmarked in that request for physical improvements to the park. The public survey concluding soon will give us a view of the public's desires for prioritizing phase 1 improvements. The project team will confirm phase 1 improvements, begin construction with the $3.4 million already allocated to the project. This means final cost estimates and construction plans will be developed through 2022, with construction of phase 1 improvements planned for early 2023. Should additional funding be made available, those phase 2 plans will proceed as well, and the team will strive to implement those improvements in a cost-effective and timely manner.
Thanks, Sean. So that's our presentation. Hopefully we've answered all your questions, but we've certainly given you enough time here to ask questions if you have them. We appreciate your attention and the time that you've spent listening to our presentation, and we're just so happy to share the vision plan with you, and we'll open it up for questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Kristen. Council members, questions for, yes, Councilmember Peter Estra.
Thank you for that amazing presentation. I was on Historic Landmark Commission the last time we attempted to do something to this park. And in addition to serving an important current function, it also has a long storied historic presence. Just creating that parabolic walkway instead of the concentric squares at the time was a big deal in justifying how we were honoring the historicity of this place. This design, while beautiful, certainly destroys any of that classical concentric square concept, the formal park concept that was presented at that time as being what would be most honoring historically. Are you confident in your ability to make the case that this respects the historicity? And then secondly, my other question is, there is the plan for the passive area with trees, whereas last time we did a redesign, trees were actually removed and the parabolic walkway was actually put in to mitigate loitering and other social issues that happened at the park. Can we talk about those forces and if we feel confident in this redesign, given that those social forces are still at play?
Thanks, Councilmember, for your questions. I'm wondering if Kat or Anna want to answer the cultural landscape report questions and historic landscape question to start with.
Why don't I just start? And Kat, you've been studying it quite a bit lately that I'd love for you to give more details here. But one thing, Councilmember, that we've learned, this study was just commissioned and will be going before the Kat, you might need to correct me here, the Historic Landmark Commission here soon to review that report, but it uncovered a lot more history and findings that were incredibly helpful to shape this plan. So we've been coordinating with that group, conducting that study, and to understand every step as they were developing it, what they were learning, what their findings were that might influence the park design. So that is definitely a large consideration in this concept, is how well those align. Kat, do you want to elaborate on that of what you've read in that their very latest report?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. And this is such a great question. We have been working with a consultant to develop a cultural landscape report for the site with the intent of it being reviewed by Historic Landmarks prior to us going to the commission with the vision plan. So we actually presented earlier this month to the cultural landscape report to the Historic Landmarks Commission, and it was received very well. They had a couple of questions. And so, yeah, we presented that in the context of coming back in March to present the vision plan. And there were a number of elements of the park that were really highlighted as having a lot of historic integrity and were really necessary to be maintained throughout the design of the vision plan. And so this plan kind of touches on those elements that were found and presented in the cultural landscape report, kind of maintaining the pervious surface of the park, having it be a gathering space, maintaining the perimeter tree structure of the park, and then kind of the circulation and entrances that we see in this vision plan in the corners and the mid-block entrances. And those were kind of the main things addressed, but we will be presenting to Historic Landmarks on March 3rd to kind of more specifically outline individual elements of this vision plan design and how they align with the cultural landscape report. So I think that's just a resource that we have now that we haven't necessarily had in the past that has really helped guide the direction of this vision plan.
Thanks, Kat. I'm going to have to ask the council member to repeat the second question. I was focusing in on the first one.
At that time, we had talked about the removal of trees in order to prevent loitering and other activities at the park that particularly the neighbors were concerned about. And now we're talking about putting in more trees again after that movement. And I'm just wondering, are there mitigation plans, or are we still concerned about those same activities for which we removed trees?
Right. And I'm going to let Anna answer this, but I'm just going to start by saying, trees were one of the highly requested items from the public. And this plan was built around crime prevention through environmental design, principles of sightlines. So having sightlines through the park so that people can see into the area, and folks are much less likely to commit crimes when they feel like they can be seen by other people, which is probably why some of the trees were taken out. We have worked with the forester in all of our parks to uplift the trees so that there is clear sight lines on the more mature trees, and we'll continue to do that. It's a little bit harder with the younger trees to do that, but lifting the trees up will certainly help with the sight lines. Anna?
Yeah, there has been some progression in crime prevention through environmental design practices. And one of those is recognizing that, removal of all trees will not create a space that people want to spend a lot of time in. That we need to keep some of that in order to attract people to a green space to spend time outdoors. And then that will create more eyes as well. The presence of more diverse people to the park is a key ingredient here. Another element of that is what Chris is mentioning about making sure that it's not vegetation that causes some challenges to sight lines. And that's one of the things about having a tenant in the space of this, what we're proposing for the pavilion, of having a ranger station, concessions area where you have someone potentially there many more hours of the day that become kind of that presence in the park. Those are some of the key ingredients that we're finding in urban parks now make a difference in people, not only their perception of feeling safe, but also in reducing activities that are undesirable. With that, the thoughts about volunteers in the parks and other activities are some things we're hoping to add to that. So there's been some progression in thought in urban parks about the use of trees, and one of those are some key research findings that actually show that spaces in urban settings that have trees and vegetation in them that are attractive, well-maintained, and desirable to be around has shown a noticeable decrease in crime in urban settings. And those are informing some of our thoughts about what is proposed here.
Council members, any other questions?
We're good. Mr. Chair, I have just a couple clarifying questions. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding the history of the project and where we go next. And I know that there are great slides in there, but if I could just restate it. So this is a project that was started 2021, and it was, if I'm understanding it correctly, it was initiated by Parks, by administration. And so this is and the consultant was hired, there's community was engaged, there's this plan. Is this to be seen as a master plan? Well, first of all, correct me if I'm wrong on that. I don't remember it being a sort of a council initiated plan, but I just want to make sure I understand that. And then is this to be seen as a master plan, or is this like the actual schematic plan that would be intended to be constructed? Does that make sense? Because I think there's a big difference between those two things, right? So
Yeah.
Are we agreeing to like, these are the kinds of elements and the kinds of parks? I know that we're not voting on this right now, this is informational, but would we be adopting this as the types of things we want, or as like the actual plan for what's going to get built?
So this would be, we're looking at actually implementing these items, depending on the budget and what we have available. This is not considered a master plan. It's really a site plan. There's been lots of discussion about what's a master plan, what's not, and we'll look to the planning division and the mayor's office to get more guidance on what really constitute a master plan. But this is not really changing the way this park functions significantly. I mean, we're adding amenities, but still there's going to be large and small activities that happen in the park. And so there's no real policy change that would make it into more of a master plan. It's more of a site plan, and the amenities that we are looking to put in this space. And yes, at this point, we are fairly confident, but we're still taking public survey input on the public's interest and support for this, for the amenities that have been proposed and the way it's laid out. And from there, once we feel like we can move forward with the public input, we will go ahead and start with construction documents after we understand what the priorities are and what the funding level will be.
I appreciate that, Kristen. So a follow-up question would be then, would the next time would the first time the council takes official action on this be in a CIP budget appropriation for the improvements, or what is our what do we vote on, or do we not in this case? I mean, it seems like, of course, the funding we would have to approve, but is that the only thing, or are there other items?
Additional funding, you would definitely approve. And currently, we do have some funding to implement in this park for new services in Pioneer Park. It's impact fee funding, so it would all have to be new services. You certainly would vote on CIP projects or bond projects or any other additional funding that could go into this park. As we said, it's a $20 million plan. We have $3.4 million, and some of that has already been used with engagement and that kind of thing. So that's where we're at right now.
I appreciate that. And I guess the reason why I'm asking is this, I mean, this slide's about the lack of access to park space for downtown residents are very compelling, and we know that downtown is growing. But I think it's worth having the conversation about, do we prioritize improvements to an existing park over increasing the number of parks, for instance, in places like the Fleet Block, which is also an underserved part of the city for park space. Does investing in this make it harder for us to create significant usable open green space on the Fleet Block that would actually be a benefit to the Granary District? And so those are, I mean, I guess that's a decision I would want to be able to make in context, not just, is this an important, awesome thing that we want to have? Because of course it is. But how do we, like, how do we make a decision as to, do we improve an existing thing, add a new thing, or improve all the other existing things that need improvement in the city? So, so I appreciate this. I personally have no concerns with the vision plan as it's been presented, but I just want to make sure that we're having that discussion in terms of, this is a big investment, so where do we want to put that parks money in our city? And of course, Allen Park and everything else should all be considered in context.
Councilmember Valderrama.
I agree with you,
Mr. Chair?
Darren. I agree with you, Darren. I think it's very compelling. Like you saw that really Central City doesn't have any green space essentially other than Pioneer Park. I envision Pioneer Park being the central park of our capital city. I have high hopes for the park. I think we are starting, really well. I also think that as other groups are trying to get additional funding, that's another way for us to leverage, where we put if we put more parks, in the area, or if we put all of our eggs in the one basket, which is Pioneer Park. But that's a good thing that we're seeing right now, that there are other groups interested in the park and investing more than just what we can do with our limited resources. So I just wanted to say that I envision this park as the RDA chair as well, looking at the redevelopment of Station Center and the closeness to it. It all seems like things are moving in the right direction in this area of downtown, and looking at the Olympics, essentially maybe in 10 years, this could be something that we could be working on now so that we can utilize this park for that as well, for such an event that is so beneficial to the state, but to Salt Lake City. So thank you for your consideration. And thank you to the staff. I think this is great.
Thank you. Councilmember Pui.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to just say that the project looks amazing. Now, just to, just follow Councilmember Mano's comments, I would like to see the thing, and I wanted to see this project and the whole, looking at everything else, because we also have, the administration is working on the Glendale Water Park, and what are we going to do there? They keep talking about a regional park, but then the money keeps, moving on that regional park, right? And I have air quotes here. And I also want to understand, a little bit about the process of communicating with the community, because sometimes we're setting up the expectations high, and I'm reading right now a few articles in my computer about the administration, telling the community that this park is going to be remodeled and showing this project, and this is amazing, and I'm generally supportive of it, but we also need to see all the other projects we need to fund. And it's, I don't want the neighbors near the Pioneer Park and and the Councilmember Baltimore's district to be disappointed when we say, well, we also need to do these other things and we have limited amount of money, and we set the expectations so high. So I would like clarification about how we communicate also with the press about what we are doing, to make sure that this body has not their hands tied. And I feel sometimes that some of these things puts us in a corner saying, you have to approve this because we already told everybody. And I'm not picking, I'm not saying anything. I just hope that this doesn't come up as rude, and forgive me if it does, but I love this project, and this is an amazing thing, and I wish we can do it, and I hope that we can do it. You have an ally on me for this, but I think that I want to make sure that we have clarifications about first how we communicate with the community about this, and second, I hope that we also are looking at the big picture, maybe the bond that we're going to be doing, or the administration wants to suggest to do a bond about parks and whatnot. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one question about the funding side of the house. So we have the Housing Administration working with the state, excuse me, I'll just come out right and read the policy questions. The administration, how any state funding might integrate into this park funding. How our funding and the state funding and how we control that in the vision statement. How do you envision that working?
Thanks for that question. At this time, the state funding has not been approved, and so we are anxiously waiting to hear that. We are super appreciative that the Pioneer Park Coalition is seeking additional funding from the state, and if it's granted, then we'll look to Pioneer Park Coalition for a business plan to make sure that we maintain public access and we reflect those guiding principles that were shared. And we will work with them to try to figure out how that will work together. At this time, we're not there yet. We're waiting to see if the funding comes through, and then we will definitely have those conversations with the coalition to see how we can make these improvements to the park.
Thank you. I have one more vision plan question, but I think I'll give it time over to Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you. I do have a couple of questions on this. First is, I didn't see, and maybe I missed it, but where there was any sort of talk about how much this would increase the maintenance on Pioneer Park and where that is being considered, because this looks like a unicorn, and I just want to make sure we continue feeding the unicorn if it happens. So I would be curious as to where or how we've thought of a long-term maintenance funding plan. And so that's question number one. And question number two is that we know that there were some funds allocated, I believe you 1.6 million. Is that how much you said? 3.6 million? 3.6 million, right? And I'm wondering if we use that 3.6 million, how far does that get us? I mean, at the end of the day, this plan that you've created for us is over 20 million, right? So we'd still need 17 million or so after the 3.6. So like, what if that doesn't happen? What if it takes years for that to happen? And are we going sort of, I think this is in the same line of some of my other council members' questions, is, how are we looking at this holistically and as a citywide thing, and not just this unicorn here, but all of the unicorns in our parks, right? So I just wonder if we reallocate that 3.6 million to a different park until we know that we're going to get the full 20 million from somewhere. I don't know. I mean, just throwing things out there.
Okay, lots of thoughts there. Let me start with the maintenance. So currently, public land staff dedicate about 80 hours per week to Pioneer Park. And so we have a good amount of time that we spend maintaining the park right now. Some of these new features would probably take more maintenance funding. For example, the concessions or the source water feature would likely take more maintenance funding. We haven't calculated that. It's just so early in the process, we haven't calculated it yet. The pickleball courts, the basketball courts, the playground, we're currently maintaining those sites or similar sites to those in the park right now. So that is, I feel like we wouldn't be asking for more funding to cover that. And we would have to calculate that. I mean, one of the things that this plan does is it upgrades a lot of old facilities, and including irrigation and the playground and the courts. And our staff takes a lot of time to maintain older facilities. Newer facilities take less time to maintain and upgrade. Let's see, I was going to remember what your second part of that was. Say again, just
I don't
briefly
know
what-
if
what
you, I don't know if you necessarily need to answer. It was more of along the line of the concerns that some of the other council members brought up of where that 3.6 million, how far it's going to go, knowing we'd need another 17 million to complete this plan and wondering where that's going to come from, versus kind of looking at all of this very holistically, and if there's another place to put that 3.6, or if that's something we should consider in a reallocation while we're getting more of the majority of that 20 million. So we're not just putting
Right.
3 million in and then saying, oh, we're buying the pony, not the unicorn, or
Right.
something.
Yeah, the 3.44 million is in impact fees, and impact fees can be spent on new services in the park. And so impact fees could not be used for some of these projects that are proposed here. It would have to come from different funding. It could come from the state funding. It could come from general fund. It could come from a bond. And so some of those ideas about Fleet Block or Glendale Water Park being new parks are all impact fee eligible, and as well as Ellen Park. Those are all new parks. And so impact fees certainly could go to that. How far would the 3.44 million go? I don't think engineering or Sean wants to try to do that calculation in his head this quickly, but you know, you can consider that it would probably be a small portion. And I don't know if you have some of that information.
In the survey that's available online right now, we are asking the community to prioritize what they would like to see first. So we're understanding what's the sort of urgent need or most useful thing to have first. And we've grouped things together that makes sense to do at one time in that approach. And it's not that those come down to that exact dollar value. We'll be figuring that out when we do the phase 1 design, but at least we have some direction that's telling the community that we don't have the funds to do the $20 million vision plan all at once. And you'll see that I wanted to kind of clarify that this vision plan is one that is scaled to what other urban parks have, and that's why we include that slide about what are people spending per square foot on their urban parks. And it is far less than many of these examples, but putting you in alignment with what the expectations are for the type of activities and amenities you can find in a downtown. So we did try and scale with that for the thought for your downtown park. But we want that thought of first phase and knowledge for the public to know that we don't have the funds to do it all at once, to be clear, but we certainly would seek additional funds in a variety of sources to help complete this. This master planning effort of a vision was really intended to make sure that we weren't having things that come along in small increments and conflict with each other, but really we're trying to make sure that that's integrated in a thought of what you want it to be over time.
And thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Thank you very much. I have one final question. We need to move on. So, Kristen, appreciate very much. Kat, Anna, on the presentation. I have one just more of the plan here. It's a beautiful park, but we have 3 avenues around it that are like the Mississippi River to cross. And have we planned any street calming ideas, and is that part of the budget? A quick answer now, but just think of that. We need to focus in on some of the street calming areas if we want to get to a nice, beautiful park. If you got a 30-second answer, that'd be great, because we need to press on, because we got other things to cover. But I love this presentation. I look forward to the future conversations on the parks.
Yes, you see some street crossings that are proposed here, some crosswalks mid-block, and other ways of entering the site. Those are in the cost of that $20 million anticipated, as well as a transit stop. to encourage that access directly onto the site. And we've been coordinating with UDOT for their state-controlled streets.
Thank you very much, and thank you again for this wonderful presentation. Have a great evening. Council,
Thank you.
go ahead, Cindy.
Sorry, just one thing, if it's okay with the council, this would be an example of, and I know this is discussed briefly, but that definition that we're trying to work out with the city attorney's office and with the administration of which things are master plans, which things are site plans, and that type of a thing. Something that is spending a lot of money over a long period of time may fall into the category that the council would want to weigh in on in terms of just having it on your books as approved. The plans previously on Pioneer Park, at least one of them was brought to the council, and the council actually declined. They approved a section of it, but not the rest, as they noted. So if it's okay with you, we would continue to check with the attorney's office and administration on this. There was a real movement to try to get the parks plans into the formal process that included the council adoption. So is that acceptable if we can just continue to work with? Okay.
Please. Yes.
Mr.
Thank you
Chair, could I offer just one additional sentence, which
30
is
seconds.
that the Public Lands Department is planning to bring the general plan or the master plan for parks and open space. I think it's the open space master plan is what they're calling it. It's tentatively scheduled now for March 22nd. I realize that doesn't resolve all the problems, but it resolves one of them.
Thank you very much, Allison. We will now move on to item number 5, the budget amendment number 4 for fiscal year 2021 to 22, follow-up. And at the actual table this evening, we have Ben Lutke with the council staff. Mary Beth is on our screen, Chief Financial Officer. Ben, it's all yours. Great to see your face in person.
Does this one work? Okay. Good to be back. Deja vu. This is the 5th briefing for budget amendment number 4. The item for consideration today is E2, the winter overflow shelter. Now, most of the items in the budget amendment the council already voted on in November and December. This item, the council approved $400,000 for police overtime related to incidents at the shelter and in the surrounding neighborhood. There's $600,000 left in the original proposal. The council took a unanimous straw poll that the $600,000 be considered for community activities and potentially business assistance in the area around the temporary shelter, pending future discussions. Now, since that straw poll this morning, we received a revised transmittal from the administration with a new recommendation for half of those remaining funds. Attachment 6 has a budget breakdown for the overflow shelter to operate through April 15th. It shows that the funding for the shelter is split between the state, which is currently providing 33% of the funding, the county, which is providing 50%, and the city providing 17%. The current budget is $2.4 million, but they say they need closer to $3 million. So there's a $600,000 gap in the shelter's budget to continue operations. The State Homelessness Council met last week, and they voted to approve $300,000 to cover half of that funding gap using proceeds from the sale of the former road home property. The administration is recommending that if the state approves half of the funding, which they did last week, then the city provide matching funds for the other half, so $300,000. There are 3 policy questions if the council is interested. First, to what extent the voluntary overtime shifts for law enforcement are being filled. The hope was that multiple jurisdictions would be able to contribute police officers to fill those voluntary shifts. Second, if the council's interested in potential funding for the community activities and business assistance, those terms are not defined, so they would need to go through an analysis to make sure that since these are ARPA dollars, that they comply with the Treasury's guidance for allowable uses. And the last question is whether additional resources may be needed at or around the Overflow shelter, including after it's scheduled to close on April 15th. We have Andrew Johnston here who can speak to this item and address council questions.
Thank you, Ben. And I turn the time over to Andrew.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I believe Ben did a great job, excuse me, of the overview. You have in your packet, obviously, the budget and the breakdown of where the money is needed right now. Shelter the Homeless is the one that is has the gap of $600,000 for their lease costs, security, meals, transportation, staffing, administration. And from the city perspective, based on the restrictions on the Rescue Act funding, putting a contingent into this request that it could only be used on the leasing costs based on needing that motel and the social distancing to comply with COVID restrictions for that funding. Makes sense, and Shelter the Homeless agrees to that as well.
Thank you, Andrew. Mary Beth, did you have any any addition to add?
No, I think that Andrew summed it up. I think that, that is one of the reasons that we had a delay in this transmittal is we wanted to ensure that this ARPA funding, that the $300,000 met ARPA eligibility, and it does, as long as it sits as portion of the lease.
Thank you. Council members, any questions?
Mr. Chair, I'll ask a question. Do we know where we are on the spend down of the $400,000 that was allocated for police overtime? I know you mentioned that briefly, but are we looking at spending that completely? Are we looking at having left over or needing more in terms of council-funded police overtime for this site? And do we know?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the numbers in front of me, or Councilman Romano, I believe. I would anticipate that the spend down is not going as quickly as would be anticipated since they've covered about 2/3 of the shifts on average right now. But that's my assumption at this point. We can get some actual numbers to you, I think, fairly quickly.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Any other further questions? All right. Appreciate that very much, Andrew, and have a good evening. We'll move on to item number 6.
So do we need to roll call that, or what do, straw poll that? We just vote tonight, okay.
This is on the formal council.
And can you clarify then what the vote is on? Because I can't find the exact number or what the ask is. Can't see it.
The administration's proposal is to use just over $300,000. It's $301,000 from ARPA for the leasing of the Overflow shelter. That would be the vote tonight if the council supports.
For the leasing? Oh, policing.
No, for the lease of the property, because the lease is eligible under ARPA. So instead of the $300,000 going to other operations, such as staff salaries, it would go to the lease for the use of the Ramada Inn.
Okay. All right. We're it's February 15th, and this ends April 15th. And we were talking about this in December, and it was an emergency, and people were going to die, and And we kind of figured things out, and now we're back at this, like, for the lease. Guys, come on.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Victoria had it.
Go ahead.
Additionally, while siting a shelter might be difficult and require many municipalities coming together, understanding that it takes around $2 million to host an emergency shelter, which is something we have to do annually, is not something you have to wait until you have a site for. And it is all around malpractice of handling this issue to not have these funds already allocated and to repeatedly come to the same well for funding. As a nonprofit professional, I would never be able to do that. It's a malpractice, and we're empowering a learned helplessness if we continue to be the well that people can come to ad nauseum.
Any further questions from the council? Thank you very much, Andrew. And we'll move on to, well, at this time, we're at our break period, so we're going to take a break right now. Oh, sorry. I missed you, Councilmember Gordon.
I just had a question about if we are getting any closer to deciding what we would use the funds that we set aside for to assist with neighborhood programs and businesses.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Economic Development owed us a document with a proposal, and they have given us that, but we have been so overwhelmed with the legislative things that we have not been able to focus on that. So they've done their piece. We need to do ours and then get that to you.
Okay.
And it'll be entirely at your discretion, but that's coming up.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that that commitment doesn't get lost in all of these other fundraising requests and everything else. So, thank you.
Right, and we did make the decision months ago that we knew this 600,000 was sitting out there. We were looking for the funding, so that was always been out there. The state has provided the 300,000. The 300,000 is where the gap is. So we did have that discussion because I know Councilmember Mono had that concern for that $600,000. That's why we put it aside to look for additional funding. And the state came up with the 300,000 at that point, most recently. So thank you very much. We're at our break right now. Let's take a break until 4:10. Thank you. are now at item number 7, budget amendment number 6 for fiscal year 2021 to 22, follow-up. At the table, we have Ben, and on the screen, we have Mary Beth Thompson from Chief CFO, and John Voigt, Budget Director. Ben, time's yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This is the third briefing for budget amendment number 6. The public hearing is scheduled for tonight, and potential action is scheduled for March 1st. At the last briefing, the discussion included potentially adding some of the requests in this budget amendment for new full-time employees to the upcoming annual budget, so all the city's competing needs can be considered together in context. So first, I'll walk through the administration's responses to the council's follow-up questions, and then after that, we have information on item A8, which is a request for 10 new police officers. So the first item is A1, the Suezo Business Center. And the council was asking about the status of the membership, how much it would cost to fund it to get to the annual budget. So this ongoing expense can be linked up with the city's funding cycles. So the city's membership has already expired. It expired in September of last year. The business center is voluntarily continuing services pending the request for ongoing funding to be considered by the city. Funding 9 months, this would be from when the membership expired in September to the end of the fiscal year, would cost $18,750. In the next annual budget, the full cost, $25,000, would then need to be added so that the membership doesn't lapse and continues for all of next fiscal year. There's no higher or lower membership for a government.
Mr. Chair, may I interrupt real quick?
Councilman Fowler.
Thanks. So Ben, that would put us on the regular budget cycle. What
Correct.
you just said. So we'd add the 18,000 for right now, and then in a couple of months when we're in budget season, basically, potentially make it a line item where we'd add 25,000, and then we would just be on a regular budget rotation.
Correct. Okay. And you can certainly ask the mayor to include it in her recommended budget.
Thank you.
I wanted to clarify that there's not multiple membership levels, but the state and the county have chosen to fund more than the $25,000 membership level. The county provides $130,000 annually, and the state provides a little over $250,000 annually.
Just stopping at that, if there's any questions about this one, I was wondering if we want to do a straw poll on approving the budget for this fiscal year and then going back to the cycle that you were just talking about. Okay.
Okay. And for the recorder, that was unanimous.
That was unanimous. Thank you.
So the next item is A3, Biohive, and this is a very similar situation. The city's membership expired in September last year. The amount to cover the 9 months from September to the end of this fiscal year is higher. It's $37,500. And the department clarified this was originally a one-time expense, but they now consider it an ongoing expense that should be added to the annual budget. The original $50,000 was used for a Utah Life Sciences Summit, and it also contributed to branding, marketing, and newsletters from the Biohive organization.
Any questions on this? And straw poll on the same thing, because this is also a partial and moving it on to the annual budget afterwards.
I just my opinion, I'd prefer just to not fund the partial funding and wait until the budget, the actual budget, and look at the membership at that point. But that's just how I feel. FYI.
Okay.
The original request was 50,000, the partial would be 37, and the original request is 50, but the partial would be 37, but we're Councilmember Fowler's suggesting 0 for this year and reconsider it in the annual budget for the future years.
Correct.
I could go either. I could go with that. I mean, I could go either way.
Mr. Chair, I was learning a lot about, what the city is trying to do with this, and their focus on bringing this, biotechnology and the competitive advantage we have here in Utah, and their focus on trying to get people from mostly the west side to actually learn about this as a career path. And to me, that was a very powerful statement and a very powerful mission. And I believe that we having a seat at the table and this on this membership will mean a lot to my community. So, I will prefer to keep that seat at the table. And I know that it's not that we lose the seat at the table just because we're not funding it, but I think it means a lot to the community to have that voice, and we are putting our money where our mouth is. So I would prefer that we do support, the 9-month thing, and then we ask the administration to actually put it on the budget. If this is a priority for the administration, they should put it on the budget.
Mr. Chair, I wanted to second that because I feel like we're looking into economic development. Powerful message here for our city, and $50,000 is really not that much in the grand scheme of things, so I think we should support it.
Okay, so Councilmember Pietrasser.
Can I just ask a clarifying, is this a similar situation to what we have with Swazo, where we were on and off cycle and that's why it's being brought to us now?
Correct. It's similar to Swazo. Swazo and Biohive were both funded mid-year in a budget amendment using federal CARES dollars. Economic development might be able to clarify this. My understanding is a difference is that Swazo provides ongoing services,
right,
whereas Biohive has more discrete services like the summit happens at one time. It's not an ongoing service.
And I know that, Swazo does that, and I know that our funding is integral to the Swazo functionality. Is this a for-profit entity that is, are they in a similar situation where they're counting on this 50,000 to execute their mission? Or are we just one of multiple revenue streams that,
I know we're one of multiple partners that are providing revenue to Biohive. I don't know the answer of what kind of organization they are.
Yeah, I was wondering if we would be impeding programming by taking Councilor Fowler's recommendation.
I know if I see Lorena is on the screen, I'm not sure if she's ready to jump in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Those are great questions. And of course, we take your questions seriously, especially when we're dealing with our general fund. We do have our Clark Cahoon as well, who can answer those questions specifically to Biohive, but they have been counting on these dollars, just to let you know. Clark? Maybe he's not. My understanding is that this is a nonprofit entity, and basically we're working side by side with them as well. There is a summit coming up in March, and there will be another one in the fall. So again, they have been planning on our support for them to continue their work. And furthermore, as Councilman Foy mentioned before, they're working very hard to ensure that we are actually getting the training for many members of our community, specifically on the west side. I believe Clark is actually joining us, and he can add more to my comments.
Sorry, I was having a few technical difficulties.
1 second, Clark. Go ahead,
One
Cindy.
of the things I want to point out is what we're trying to do is to get the departments to recognize these things early and get them in the process in a timely manner. So this expired in September. So that means September or August or July, it could have been brought to you, or October, November, December could have been brought to you. So I think at some point the departments need to make whatever adjustments are necessary to get things into the annual budget, or if it's an emergency, to get things to you promptly. So someone must have known that this ended in September.
I think that's an excellent point. And this actually was included in previous budget amendments, but they were pushed back to now. So I think you're absolutely right, Cindy, in your comments. However, we had come to the table before now.
Okay, it didn't ever come to the council, so I guess then the issue is at a different level of the administration. But the point is, the administration is obligated to get the council the information in a timely manner, and the departments are accountable to identify the needs early enough. So if you're looking at your budget for this year, this upcoming year, look at what might expire in July, August, September, October, November, anything that expires included in your annual budget request to the mayor, and then we'll be, in better shape and you won't have the hassle.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that. We will do that. And we, of course, don't want to be coming back to you to continue asking for budget amendments. So thank you so much for your comments.
Mr. Chair, if I just can clarify on that, I'm going to turn to Ben as the guru of budget amendments. And so this may have come up, but it was never brought in front of the council on a previous budget amendment. Is that right?
That's correct. I do not recall this request being in a transmittal to the council. So I think Lorena was referring to the administration's internal process before the council would have seen it.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing that it came for us and we were like, nah, this isn't important to us. Okay. Thanks.
No, Ben is correct. Just want to make sure that nothing is misrepresented. He's correct on his statement.
Thank you very much. I mean, we don't have to make a...
Wasn't this in the original budget?
Hold on, Clark, 1 second. We don't have to make a straw poll or anything at this point. We have a public hearing this evening, and then we'll continue on the discussion side. So I want to just continue on the discussions. We have a lot more to cover for this budget amendment. Sorry, I'm cutting you off there, Clark, but I need to continue on the other discussion items. Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I know we have other things, but I would be interested a little bit in learning a little bit more. If Clark can give just a quick preview of, not preview because I know a little bit about it, but just a very quick little thing about this so I can have more information in deciding how I want what needs to happen here for me. Thanks.
Sure. Clark, back to you.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. So, are there specific questions that you have, or you would like just an overview, council member?
Councilmember Petrowski, do you want to ask your question again?
I was just wondering about the nature of the organization. I'm much more familiar with SWAZO, so the prorating of the funds to them makes sense to me, but I was wondering about, what sort of organization it is, what role this funding plays in that organization in order to prioritize it within the context of what we're being asked.
Sure, thank you. So towards the beginning of Mayor Mendenhall's administration, she convened the life science industry to understand a little bit more about it and to see what partnerships could be formed. Through those discussions, it became really apparent that one of the things that was lacking was the inability to, just the lack of coordination of sharing the story of what was going on within this industry and the momentum that it had, and also the lack of connectivity between industry and education partners. So between the messaging and between that additional connectivity within the industry, which is really deeply rooted within the city, from the University of Utah, their commercialization of new technologies, their graduates that they churn out. So the Biohive is really an answer to making sure that we tell the story of what's going on, what the opportunities are within this industry, And the way the administration has focused its energy as an economic development strategy is to create these public-private partnerships, to have a seat at the table with other partners, and to leverage the opportunity to make those connections with the Salt Lake School District and other education partners so that we can show, what the opportunities are, what the jobs and the careers are in STEM education related fields, because there's this ripe opportunity with this industry. Because we have that pipeline, because we have high wages, it's recession proof compared to other industries, and it's actually a really diverse industry in and of itself with opportunities, whether it's manufacturing, advanced degrees, or even lab technicians. There's so many entry points. Because of those things, it's unique compared to other industries. And so the Biohive answers that question of what can we do to collaborate with other organizations throughout the city, at the state level, at the local level, and make sure that we tell that story. So it's workforce development, it's STEM education, and it's branding and messaging what unique opportunity there is within this industry. And it's great that the city has a seat at the table with so many partners to be able to bring those things together. And it is a unique structure with the Biohive board, with having Mayor Mendenhall sit on it. And there's just a lot of really continued and great partnerships that are brewing right now because of so many people coming to the table and having Salt Lake City be a part of those discussions.
Thank you, Clark.
Thanks for the time.
Just one last thing. Biotechnology is, one of the fastest growing industry in our state, and we have probably the fastest growing in the nation. So there is a huge opportunity here, and I don't know if this is going to change everything, but I'm hoping that it does, and that we can bring all these different kind of jobs to my community. I think that would make a big deal.
One last thing, I promise, Mr. Chair. I just want to say I'm not supportive of it. It's about, all these budget amendments are about the process. So just an FYI that I think it's great and amazing and supportive. It's about the process for me.
Thank you for that last comment. Nice job. Appreciate that. Ben, back to you.
That takes us to A4, which is fix the bricks. The council was interested in what program changes, what additional resources could be provided to speed up the time participants are waiting in order to receive seismic improvements to their homes. The administration believes that the greater involvement of existing employees, given their skill sets at the Housing Stability Division, will decrease wait times. It's important to note, though, that wait times are significant. We've heard comments in the council office. Some people have waited multiple years. So while this move from the fire department to housing stability may decrease wait times, it's not going to be a change from waiting a couple years to a couple months. There will still be significant wait times. The administration also gave an update that they're applying for state funding. Up until this point, it's always been federal funding for the program. The state funding would increase the number of single-family homes that can participate, and it might expand the program beyond single-family homes. This could include multifamily and potentially commercial. Multifamily and commercial are larger buildings, so the seismic improvements are much more expensive. So that is something they're pursuing. It has not been awarded yet. The other update is the council was looking for information on participants. Where are they located? What is the relative participation rate between different neighborhoods in the city? Back in 2019, there was an analysis that found most of the applicants were from higher and middle income neighborhoods. There was not much participation from lower income neighborhoods. This is not surprising given the 25% required match, where the grant covers 75% of the cost, but the homeowner is on the hook for that 25%. So that is a significant barrier, since some of these seismic upgrades can be $10,000 or more. The administration's looking at options to cover or help cover a portion of that 25% requirement on the property owner, but they don't have recommendations at this time. They hope to come back to the council with suggestions.
And that's budget neutral.
Correct. It is just moving the current 2 positions and the program to housing stability from the fire department. So budget neutral.
Thank you.
If there's no comments or questions, the next item is A7, a proposal to restore July fireworks shows funding. Oh, thank you. Yes, A6. I scrolled too far. A6, the public safety building access control upgrade and support. The question was, is there a deadline either from the state or the federal government in order to provide this security upgrade to stay in compliance with the rules that make it a secure facility? There is no specific deadline. The concern that the department has is the risk of a security failure, basically the equipment malfunctioning, goes up the longer it's used, since this is the original equipment installed when the building was constructed 9 years ago. The replacement, the replacement parts, if the system fails, is expected to be a half-year delayed because of supply chain issues. And the upgrade is also expected to have a 6-month delay. So whether it's upgraded or the original equipment fails and needs to be replaced, either way, it's probably a 6-month delay in order to get the parts.
And they're looking for the funding now so that they can start the process now so they don't lose 6 months.
You got it.
Gotcha.
The preference is upgrading it so that they can avoid having to try and get replacement parts that may not be used very long and would be significantly delayed.
Right, because they'd have the money, also they'd have the money now instead of 6 months later when we, okay. Councilmember Pui.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Originally when we started talking about this a couple of weeks ago, we were, to Councilmember Fowler's point and the council administration's point that, all of these budget amendments, are making it to a budget amendment instead of to the regular budget, right? And we talked about like, well, can we, maybe some of these things, well, I guess I probably talked about this. I don't think anybody understood what I was trying to say or myself, but some of these things maybe need to be approved because there are grants and we have deadlines for it. And that was how this came up with this question. We came up with this question is this needed right now? Do we need a deadline for this? And from your explanation and from what I read here is, no, we don't have a deadline for it. We need it. It may fail, but isn't that true for all the things that are, we are behind? And I'm not saying that this is not important. I think this is probably as important as everything else, but can we wait a few more months, like 3 months or something to start the budget session is the ultimate question that I wanted an answer for. And I guess it may be, right? Obviously the point of, I take the point that is saying we need the money now so we don't have to delay another 6 months. But I guess the answer, I don't know if there is an answer to what I'm trying to say, but the question seems to be, do we need to do it now? Maybe yes, maybe not. Is that really what is happening?
If someone from the police department or IMS wants to jump in, I'd defer to them. My suspicion is the operational impacts would be significant since the security equipment into and out of the building, if it failed, it would limit the ability for people to come and go from the building, and that could have impacts on other operations for the department.
Mr. Chair, but to be clear, the system is working right now. It's just old.
Correct. There are parts that have failed and have been replaced previously, but it is working right now, is my understanding.
Thanks.
So then, now we're at A7. The proposal to restore July fireworks shows funding.
Can I get, I will get an answer to that, council member's question soon. So
Please.
Give me just a second and I'll get an answer to that question, okay?
Thank you, Mary Beth.
So the council had asked in the last briefing if there was any data that can show that having large professional fireworks shows results in a reduced personal usage of fireworks. The fire department responded there is no data to show that, Anecdotally, they have observed that it might be true, but there was not data to demonstrate that. The administration reiterated that the fireworks shows would be canceled if air quality was above 100 on the AQI air quality index, or if the drought exceeded level 1.2, which I believe is a federal measurement of drought intensity. The city would receive a refund if the shows were canceled at least 10 days in advance.
Any questions?
I feel like I'm talking a lot today, and I'm gonna.
It's all yours.
It's my third cup of coffee, so I'm gonna be aware of that. So I appreciate the administration and finding some information about this. I still think that it doesn't match with the values of the city, and I know that we can still celebrate, and I will still challenge the administration on finding another way of celebrating, or if fires is the concern here, and maybe we can spend this money on educating people why not to buy fireworks. I think that is more, it matches more with our values than spending $25,000 in fireworks. But yeah, I rest.
Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, on this particular item, I know we're not necessarily straw polling, nor do we need to straw poll all of the items, but I would propose a straw poll on this so that when it comes time for motion sheet making, Ben isn't making the motion sheet like 62 seconds before we have to make the motion. So I would propose a straw poll to not approve this particular item, to exclude it from the budget amendment.
Do I have a motion or a straw poll on the floor to not approve this one? Yeah, thumbs up to not approve it. I have 2, 3, 4. Councilmember Ward. Oh, I should have asked for.
Sorry, I did
discuss it's a motion. It's,
sorry,
straw
could
poll.
you restate that there wasn't any data available? Is that what you said?
Correct. There was no data to show that having a professional fireworks show results in reduced personal usage. The fire department stated that anecdotally they've observed that might be true, but there was not data to demonstrate it.
Can I make a comment about the straw poll? Thanks. I get the concerns about air quality and fire safety, and I understand why that is, why Councilmember Pruitt, you think it's the wrong message for us to share, and I don't disagree with that. I mean, the 4th of July is an important holiday in our country, and I really believe in celebrating that, and that's kind of the traditional way. I love your idea of coming up with new ways to celebrate the 4th of July with drone shows, or I think you had a few other ideas, laser shows or something like that, that could have a similar experience but be better for the environment. So I absolutely think that we should do that. I just am having a little nostalgic heart problems with saying we're not going to have fireworks shows for our children to enjoy. So I'm just a little conflicted about that for the nostalgia reason, I think, and because they're important holidays, and I think there's a reason why they're national holidays and they're important for us to celebrate. So, but absolutely interested in what the next phase of how we celebrate the 4th of July could be in our country and how we can make that better for the environment.
Mr. Chair, and as an immigrant, I appreciate it's a big, celebration for me too, and I just, I think that we could do a little better than that, and I was learning about just neighborhoods in the south of the valley that are doing drone shows. So if neighborhoods are able to pool their money and do it, I feel like we can move on and learn new ways of celebrating. But I also have very much, I used to be this kid that used to spend all this money, my own savings, and buying fireworks. So I share the nostalgic.
Could the straw poll be amended to say we leave it in there for a celebration that is not fireworks? And if there is time for the administration to come up with an idea of how we could celebrate that is not connected to fireworks, I mean, I'm wondering if the council would support keeping money in there for a celebration and if they have time to figure out how to do it in an environmentally friendly and fire safe way, great. If not, that money will fall back to the general fund at the next budget. Is that possible or appropriate?
I mean, realize that this is a straw poll, so it's really not binding, but we are asking the administration to maybe look at this again, whether we use it for fireworks or not. I mean, we still have public hearing going on after this. So right now we're giving the administration the message that we want them to look at something else or nothing, but we want them to look at other ways to celebrate. And I'm kind of reading the minds here on that, and not just specifically on just 25,000 to fireworks. But again, we also have a public hearing, and we can still make a motion at a later date too.
And I'm fine withdrawing my straw poll based on asking the administration to come back with a potential different proposal for that 25 that isn't fireworks. And then I suppose we can have a discussion about it then. I don't know.
Mr. Chair, can I add one item to this discussion?
Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, thank you very much. I just wanted to remind the council that this isn't a budget amendment because we have to have a lead time for ordering the fireworks show. So the timing here is important, that if we are not allocated the money in this budget amendment, we won't have enough time to order the fireworks show. I absolutely agree that we should be looking at alternative ways of celebrating, and we will definitely take that feedback and do what we can. I'm just not sure that we have enough time in this year. So it really is a matter of no fireworks show or fireworks show at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, with that information, I would then propose my straw poll again, that we leave this out. If this is about fireworks and just fireworks, not the 4th of July celebration, not the 24th of July celebration, but whether or not we're going to fund fireworks, my straw poll is that we do not put it in this budget amendment. I'm sure we can earmark $25,000 somewhere else to look at something, but that would be my straw poll.
And that's the straw poll on the floor right now. All in favor of the straw poll? Thumbs up.
I'm just going to say my thinking too is that I think we just go forward with it for this year, but I do want to not do this long term. But I think that I don't really have enough information right now. I'm literally Googling like how much a drone show costs. According to dronegirl.com, it's $100,000, but I think
want
it needs a longer discussion.
Okay, we have the straw poll on the floor. Give me your thumbs up if you approve of the straw poll, or a thumbs down if you do disapprove of the straw poll. So I have 1 up, 2 up, 3 up, and 4 down.
And we need to say who.
So I have, sorry, Councilmember Peter Esther is a thumbs up, Ballamorse is down, Mono's down, Dugan's down, Wharton's down, Pui's up, Fowler's up. So 4 to 3, the motion or the straw poll fails, but that is also just a straw poll at this time.
Right.
So we'll move on.
That's the way the process works. We vote.
Great discussion. Ben?
Item A9 is the request for 3 new FTEs for the Arts Council. Some council members had questions to clarify to what extent these new FTEs would perform work for the nonprofit versus the city. Councilmember Fowler and I had a meeting earlier today with Felicia Baca and Lorena about this. Without going into the weeds, the new employees would perform work. They would be city employees, but they would perform work for the city and for the foundation. There is a contract between the foundation and the city that sets out certain services and programming requirements. And so some of the employees would be performing work under that contract that the foundation provides. So this is a mix of programming that the Arts Council itself provides and programming that is put out to an RFP, and then the responders to the RFP actually provide the programming. So it's both.
No questions. Or
A12, this is the citywide equity study. The council was asking for a status update. What's the timeline of the study? The study is expected to be completed in August. And this assumes that the additional funding, the $90,000 requested in this budget amendment, is approved. The additional funding is to focus outreach to and develop findings related to the city's west side, and these additional tasks are listed in the staff report. The staff report also has the project webpage, which is currently being updated. I'm not going to read it out. It's a little longer than you can just remember. No questions on that one?
No questions.
That takes us to B1. This is the request for using $176,000 in one-time funds from HUD. These are authorized under ARPA, but they're separate from the $85 million that the city received also from ARPA for fiscal recovery. So this is $3.5 million for helping people experiencing homelessness. HUD said that the city must develop a community assessment and an allocation plan before it can access these funds. The council would also have to approve a substantial amendment to the 5-year plan that governs how these HUD grants are used, and the council would have to approve the budget for those funds. So the request before the council is to use the $176,000 to create the assessment and the plan about how the other $3.5 million would be used. Now, the $176,000 is broken into 2 parts. Part 1 is $150,000 that would be used for staff, existing staff. These are not new employees. And it would be for staff work related to the development of the assessment and the plan going back to April of last year, and also forward through the rest of this fiscal year and next fiscal year. The second part is about $15,000 that could be used to reimburse the division for general fund dollars that were encumbered last fiscal year for a consultant contract. So this would be using the grant money to reimburse general fund dollars that are being used for the consultant work on this assessment and plan. I should also say that, yeah, that was a lot.
That went over my head a little bit.
Okay. Do you want me to restate? It's HUD regulations, so it's not simple.
I think I understand that we're reimbursing CAN or housing for something that they're already doing, but it's a requirement from the feds with its ARPA. Is that?
Sort of. And maybe we could ask Mary Beth to address this, because usually if you've encumbered some money from the previous year's budget, you would not get reimbursed in this year for using that money, because that money would have otherwise gone to fund balance. So it's not quite clear to me whether this money ought to be reimbursed to the department or the division, or whether it should, if they just swap out the source and that $25,000 goes into general fund balance, or exactly what. So Mary Beth has been helping us check on some of these questions. Would it be okay to ask for her help on this?
Yes. Mary Beth?
So I will try. So the study itself, I believe, would be probably a reimbursement to the city if the study has been completed. The $150,000 for staff is over an 8-year period, which means that you could do one of 2 things. You can either reduce the expenditure in the general fund for $18,750 per year over the next 8 years, or you could receive it as a revenue into the general fund, helping offset those expenditures.
So in neither of those cases, Mary Beth, is it a reimbursement to the division? Is that correct?
In neither of those cases, it's a reimbursement to the division, correct?
So the division is requesting the funding, but when you really follow the course of where the funds previously have come from and in the future will come from, it might not be exactly correct to reimburse the division for that money. It might be more correct to switch out the funding source for the $25,000 so that it's the ARPA money and not that general fund that they were just basically filling a gap with. And then the funding, the rest of the funding reduces the amount of general fund subsidy to those department employees in the coming 8 years, this year and 7 more probably. Is that right?
Correct. Now, that's correct. Now, they may need an hourly employee, right? So I think we've got to work through that to see if they don't need additional FTEs, but they may need some hourly assistance that could also, offset this $18,750 per year.
Yeah, but I just want to be clear that it's different than what we thought it was. It sounded like we were reimbursing the division, and we're not. We're making the general fund whole.
Yes, you are correct. Okay. We're making the general fund whole.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Mary Beth. Any other questions there?
So the next item, there's three more. The next one is E4. This is the state grant for the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, and it's for 5 new trailheads between Immigration Canyon and Capitol Hill. The council might remember back in August that you also approved funding for new trailheads. We've confirmed that the CIP funding was for 2 trailheads. The state grant funding is for 5. The 2 trailheads in CIP are the same as 2 in the 5. So the question was, if you approved this grant funding and you used the CIP funding as a match, does that mean you're no longer going to build the 2 trailheads that we were expecting in CIP? That's not true. You're still building the same 2 with 3 more. So 5 total. And this ties into the next item, which would be a council added item. It's to take the CIP funding from August, rescope it so that it can be used as matching funds on all 5 trailheads, not just the 2 it was originally approved for.
Councilman Ward.
Thank you. So I guess I'm concerned that we don't know whether this is E4 going to relate to the pause that was placed on new trail construction. And that has already been such a bumpy road. When we said that we were going to do a pause and then work continued, and then we said, no, it's for real this time. I think the only way that we could make it worse is if we get this wrong and there suddenly is new construction or construction of previous trails happening. But I also don't want to say no to grant money that's coming from the state. So I don't feel like I can vote on this unless I get an answer about whether or not this is going to be consistent with the pause or inconsistent with the pause. Improvements to trailheads are, I think, okay, fine. But this doesn't say anything about trailheads only.
We did ask the department, and we didn't get a question in time for publishing. Perhaps one option is if the council wanted to approve this funding and make it also subject to the annual budget contingency. We would want to work through that with the attorney's office. I'm just throwing out an idea.
Can I add another one?
Mm-hmm.
Just another idea, maybe. You've had several questions about this. Maybe what we could do is schedule a briefing from the administration on exactly, like, we could take that list of questions, I think there are like at least 5 now, about the outside review and the hold and those sorts of things. Ask for that briefing and then hold these funds until you have the opportunity to get a full understanding of what it is they're doing, and that way you would be still moving ahead, but not committing to something that could create a problem. Made that up.
Yeah, no, love it. Gonna make it a straw poll right now.
Can I clarify something
Sure.
before
Go
you
ahead.
do that, if that's
Go
okay, Mr. Chair? Is there a timeline on accepting the grant? Because I fully understand where Councilmember Wharton is coming from and that pause so that we had that community engagement. But going back to that, I don't want to lose the money either. So is there a timeline to when we need to accept the grant such that we need to do this within the timeline of this budget amendment?
There is very likely a deadline to accept grant funding. I don't know what it is right now.
Okay.
So we will find out.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we're pretty clear on the question. Oh, you could, sorry,
Well,
back to you.
I would like to
Councilmember.
find out that, but I would say, in terms of a straw poll, that in the event that we need to accept these grants, time is of the essence, that any grant money be restricted from any new trail construction. And I also would like to ask the administration for an update on where we are on that process, both having the independent audit and what the feedback has been from the public. So I would propose that.
Thank you. Any questions about the straw poll? Okay. Thumbs up if you are in favor of Councilmember Wharton's straw poll. And that is unanimous across the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, that takes us to A8. This is a request for 10 new police officers. And it's part of a larger discussion about the city's efforts to diversify public safety response options to better match the variety of situations that people experience when they reach out and call the city for help. The item in this amendment is specifically a match to a federal grant. The council did request additional information about the staffing and the different alternative response models that the city either currently has or is creating or is planning to create. After I give a summary, the Police Chief Mike Brown has a presentation for the council, as well as a couple other department directors to discuss those other models. So this item is a grant from the Department of Justice. It is $1.25 million. It's called a COPS hiring grant. And it would provide funding for 10 new police officers, one of whom would be a sergeant. The city is required to provide matching funds, and this is a 3-year grant. So over the life of the grant, the city would be covering 75% of the costs, and the grant covers 25%. It also requires that the city continue to retain these officers for an additional year after the grant period ends. The estimated cost next fiscal year would be $1.1 million, and then the year after that, another $1.1 million for the city's match. The police department stated this funding would be used to create a violent crimes unit. This would be in addition to the Project Safe Neighborhoods. That is a separate partnership between state, local, and federal agencies that are targeting the reduction of gun violence in the city. So there are 3 policy questions. Oh, before I get to those, I did want to say that this is not the first COPS hiring grant the city has had. I think this is the 4th one that the city has applied for, received, and accepted. In those instances, the police officers that were hired were then retained and they were shifted into the general fund, so they were fully covered by city revenue after the grant ended. The other thing I wanted to
Yeah.
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Yeah, quick question on that. The same thing would happen here
Very likely.
because they only have grant funding for X amount of years, and then most likely they would go into the general fund and be the line item for the however many officers that they hire, increasing the FTEs there.
Correct.
It would have to come out of our general budget at some point.
Yep, unless another alternative funding source was identified, which you don't want to count on.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
The other thing is I wanted to follow up on the council's discussion in December, where you asked staff to work with the administration on developing an infographic to summarize on one page what are all of these alternative response models. So we've sent information to the administration saying we think these are the key information, such as how does the public access this program, what are the hours of operation, what are their focus areas. Once we get that information verified, we'll work with our in-house graphics designer to create the infographic, and then we'll come back to you with that information as a tool to communicate with the public and a reminder, because the number of programs, I think, is more than most people realize. I think it's at 7 at last count. So there's 3 policy questions if the council's interested. The first is if you'd like to ask the administration for a briefing on this larger topic about hiring more police officers and how they fit into diversifying public safety response options. There are currently requests for 29 new police officers, and these are 3 different requests. There's the one I just talked about, which is 10 new police officers in this budget amendment. There's the one we talked about last week, which is 1 new police officer for the Special Victims Unit. And then there's a third request, which is a state grant asking for 18 new police officers, 3 of whom would be sergeants, and that we don't know if it's going to be awarded yet. It is asking for funding from the state Homeless Shelter Cities Mitigation Grant. So it's subject to the legislature approving additional funding to that grant, and then the city's request being approved either in whole or in part. So those 3 would be 29 new police officers. So you could have a briefing specifically about that and the broader topic of diversifying public safety response options. The other 2 policy questions are if you think this request would be better evaluated in the context of the annual budget, like the other items in this budget amendment asking for new full-time employees. And then the last question is if the administration has brought these proposals to the Racial Equity and Policing Commission for their review and feedback. That's everything for my intro. If there are comments or questions, we can jump to that. Otherwise, I know Chief Brown has a presentation.
I think those are great questions you're asking. Any questions before we go to Chief Brown?
Mr. Chair, I'll just say I'd like the answer to the question that Ben brought up about the Racial Equity and Policing Commission feedback.
Go ahead.
The other thing, and this might be better for Chief Brown, if we are in fact hiring 10 new officers for this squad, what does the training time and everything look like? This is a 3-year process, this grant, this capacity building grant. It feels like it would take at least 18 months to 2 years for this squad to be up anywhere close to the capacity that we would be asking from it. So
that's a good question. A new police officer takes about a year from hiring, training, academy training, field
training. And we're in a difficult hiring season. So I'd like to know about the efficacy of this 3-year window and actually seeing results from this sort of work.
My understanding is the violent crimes unit that would be created, existing officers would then be shifted into the unit, and they would not be new hires, they would be more experienced officers so that they can get the unit staffed up more quickly to address current violent crime. That then creates vacancies.
Right, so then the question becomes about community policing and those in our ranks. And I love enthusiastic young police, but I do not like experienced strains that might leave them having to rely on their own judgment instead of being trained properly. So,
There is a balance
Yes,
that
so,
you're highlighting.
and the chief can probably speak more eloquently to those, but
I think that, yeah, we can have the chief answer. Alejandro, Councilmember.
Very quickly, Chief, I would like to ask the chief for clarification. Don't we have funded vacancies in the police department? And you know, how does this work with that? Because I think we've been funding police vacancies, and you know, I don't know how that much it works with the whole overall budget. So if we're already paying for those, wouldn't this be budget neutral? Thank you.
So, Chief, the floor is yours at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Council. It's good to be with you this evening. Those are great questions, and I'll see if I can answer those as we move through this presentation. If you can please bring up my slide deck. Again, we're going to talk about this violent criminal apprehension team, and that would be called VCAT. That's an acronym that we've assigned to that. But really, we're talking tonight about the continuum of public safety services that we want to offer those working, living, and visiting Salt Lake City. So Chief Lieb can talk about the chat program. Director Kristen Riker can talk about the Park Rangers program. This would be a specific program to look and apprehend violent criminal in our community. And as next slide, please. Sorry. And Ben kind of laid it out. In summary, this is a program that goes through the COPS hiring program to fund 10 new police officers. They would become the violent criminal apprehension team called VCAT. They would specifically address emerging violent crime patterns, and number 2, to go after repeat violent criminal offenders in our city. It is known that a small number of repeat violent offenders are responsible for a lot of the crime in our city. And identifying and apprehending those most violent offenders can have a significant impact on crime trends and the quality of life here in Salt Lake City. Next slide. I won't go too much into this. Ben covered most of this, and this is just the technical aspect of the grant. And it is a 2020 COPS hiring program. We do have 5 years to enact it and to complete this grant. Next slide. So what will it look like? It'll have 10 officers, 1 sergeant, 9 detectives. We will make 2 intelligence-led policing ILP squads to specifically address, again, violent crime patterns and repeat violent crime offenders here in Salt Lake City. The unit will be housed within the detective investigative unit, and it'll focus and be led through intelligence-led policing strategies and performance measures that come out of our CompStat model. Next slide. Violent criminal apprehension team will focus on number 1, people who threaten to do the most harm and danger in our community. I want to point out a few weeks ago, well, maybe a week and a few days ago, a council member, that we had a case that fit the model of our violent crime apprehension team. We had a person who committed a violent act against one of our community members, leaving her with critical injuries. The suspect fled and was on the run for several days before being apprehended. This is exactly what VCAT would do. This is the model and approach that we would use. We would have a dedicated team using intelligence-driven strategies to identify, locate, and safely apprehend violent criminals here in our community. Next slide. The one thing, and this goes back to Councilmember Eschler's question, is it is a balancing act. But right now, when we have these type of crimes that occur in our city, we pull from our specialty squads, like your bike squads, to go after these individuals. And right now, the patrol officers and the detectives, they do not have the staff hours and the time to apprehend these individuals. So this is where we get that, where we leverage this team to go after these individuals. But what I want to point out, what VCAT is not, is they will not, this is not a team that would be used for low-level enforcement, for enforcement of minor infractions, traffic enforcement. They will be focused on the violent criminals in our community, those who are committed, those that commit crimes against our children, our loved ones, and complete strangers. Next slide. And this really just builds upon that continuum of public safety service. Council, this slide reiterates our commitment to a holistic approach to public safety. We will continue to support our co-responder model to remove barriers and connect people to services. Our CIT program will continue, but we will continue to develop our police civilian response team and to develop our call diversion program. So this is just one piece of this whole holistic approach to public safety. Any questions?
Any questions for Chief before he turns it over to Kristen?
I'll ask a quick question, Mr. Chair. I guess the question that Councilmember Peter Eschler brought up of this, I guess we've had vacancies in the tens at least for the last 2 years. So how would approving additional FTEs actually change anything if we can't fill up the vacancies that we have? So I mean, I think adding this has to, and I know in a couple weeks ago you talked about pay and how we're no longer the top of the state. So I think this is another one of those, like, do we need to consider this in context of if we're approving 10 additional FTEs, but we can't even hire the 30 vacancies that we have right now? How does this change anything? And will approving these additional 10 FTEs sort of force us to do salary increases in the next budget opening, which we may need to do anyway, but is this a conversation that should be had in context? And I realize that it's a grant, but I'm like wondering how if we approve the grant now, how it makes any difference, because we can't even fill I think 37 at the last time you gave us an update. So I guess I just don't understand how those moving pieces connect to each other. And if we say yes to this, how is that different than us saying no to this, given that we have 37 vacancies already sitting there?
Yeah, Councilmember Mono, great question. Right now, we have, logistically, we have 30 officers slated to start in our May Academy. And then next January, when we have another academy, we'll have another 30. So we're on a trajectory to fill those slots. It just takes time. It just takes time to get through those academy. And then going back to Councilmember Pedro Eschler's question, it's a balancing act. If you have a lot of violent crime and you have a group of individuals that are committing a lot of that crime, if you can take dedicated resources, apprehend them, get them off the street, you reduce a lot of crime. So it's a balancing act. So we would like to take these individuals, get that started, focus on that violent crime, and then backfill those 10 additional officers through the academies that will be coming. So it's just a matter of time to get through the hiring process and then get them to the street. But we feel there's an advantage to having this unit to address those violent criminals and that amount of crime that they're causing in our communities right now. It's really a function of training and not hiring, to put it very short.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Pui.
I don't want to put the chief on the spot here, but yeah, I would like a little more information about how this works and about like the vacancies. And we are already funding some of those vacancies. Could that funding, could that funding already work for this grant? And so I appreciate. I don't want to put the chief on the spot, but that information will be very useful for me. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pui. If you'd like, we can get a written response back. I can work with Mary Beth on. There is attrition savings. There's money that we aren't paying for those 36 right now. So some of that money could go towards funding this grant, our portion of it. But as we continue to hire and fill up those ranks, that hopefully that money will gradually shrink away, and we won't have that money, but we'll have our department full of police officers.
Chief and Council, this year it will be budget neutral because that's what you are using as vacancy savings.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time, Mary Beth? I had a hard time understanding it.
This year it is budget neutral because you are using vacancy savings.
Thank you, thank you.
Correct.
Council Member Mono, before we go to Christian Riker.
Sorry, yeah, I guess if this is the right strategic public safety move to take these officers that are currently, I assume, on patrol and elevate them to a detective role where they can do, I think you call it intelligence-based policing, why is it necessary for us to have this grant in order to do that? Wouldn't we make that move regardless? And if so, isn't it something that we could discuss in, 3 months when we discuss the budget opening? To the point that we've all been making for this budget amendment is, would it be something that we could consider in the context of every other need that the police department has, which we know are many?
Councilmember Mono, good question. I think we're starting to bump up, since this was awarded in 2020, we're starting to bump up against some deadlines. That's why we'd like to get started on this. And specifically, it's a goal of our revised crime control plan to focus on the violent crime that we're seeing, that we saw the spike in last year. And so we think this is a strategic move that would help reduce the crime, and also it would leverage our officers so they could stay stay in the communities. The bike officers could work on the projects in our communities, and this squad would go after those violent criminals. That somebody's got to do that. So we're if we have a homicide or if we have assault or something like that, somebody does that.
Maybe
work.
I should ask the question a different way. Couldn't we accept the grant? You could, if with the resources that we have right now, if you could make the determination that it's the best strategy to elevate these patrol officers into this special role, and then but not increase the number of FTEs in the police department until the upcoming budget discussion in June, because it'll take until June to hire 10 more officers anyway. So at any rate, we're taking 10 officers off the street to put them in the special unit. And I will totally trust you if you say that that's the best, that creates the best safety in our community, but we can't fill all the vacancies before the budget opening. So couldn't we just discuss those additional people? Is this a circular conversation?
No. Well, actually, no. They're great questions. I think what we need is to find out exactly what the deadline is and exactly when the city received the grant. It did get a negative reception from the council at one point previously, so it's possible we are bumping up against the deadline. So what was it, March 2020, that this grant was advanced as a possibility to the city, or 2021? That's one question. Second is there a supplanting problem? And supplanting is when you take grant money and you use it for things you were already going to do. And so I would guess that might be an issue here. And then you've probably already told us this, but the whole dollar amount of the grant, it's probably in the millions. And so the question is, do we want to get, if we're going to have police officers in addition to what we already have budgeted, do we want to get some of this money from this grant resource? But we'll need to get that information. I don't think all of it is available probably right now on the call.
So these are, I think, if you have a quick answer to that, Chief, or this is just a follow-up, I think, discussion we need to have.
Mr. Chair, those are great points, and I think it's a follow-up. I do believe Executive Director Gus Jensen, we did receive that early 2020. So I think we're bumping up against deadlines on that, but I think we would be glad to have a follow-up and get you the answers, a more detailed answer for what you're asking tonight.
All right, thank you. We'll turn our time over now to Kristen Riker.
Thanks. So if you can advance to the next slide, please. This is just a brief overview of the Park Ranger program, and it looks like our little logo ended up in the middle. Anyway, the Park Ranger program provides educational services and safety in city parks, in city trails, city natural areas, through customer service to our park users and the visitors. They are serving as a friendly representative for the city. They're building relationships in our parks, creating community, and assisting park visitors. They'll support positive use of downtown parks and natural areas and help in activation efforts and maintenance. So activation efforts would be like providing education activities. For example, that could be something like teaching kids to fly fish, or about riparian corridors, just to build some of that community. Support the outreach efforts of human services organizations, because they're in the parks, they'll be talking to people and help assist those people who are in need of support to connect them with those services, and to promote voluntary compliance by educating the public about park code and park rules. So these folks are not carrying guns, and initially they are not issuing citations.
Thank you, Kristen. Any questions for Kristen on that? Any further discussions? We will have follow-up on this because we have some great questions on the whole funding and the hiring process, because it covers multiple years and it crosses multiple budget years too, the hiring process and the training process. So great questions, great discussion on that portion of the budget amendment. Ben, back to you if there's anything to finish up.
Those are all the items in the budget amendment. I think the fire chief and the 911 department director also had a quick slide.
Oh, sorry about that. Chief Lead.
Thank you, Council Chair Dugan. Good evening, Council. I'm trying to get my camera on. There we go. I think I've had the opportunity to speak with most of the council members in small groups this past fall about chat, but I'll give you a quick summary because there's so many programs going on right now. I think it's in everyone's best interest just to know the difference between each of them. So chat, again, community health access team, teams a social worker with 2 or possibly 3 firefighters in the field moving forward. And we will respond to the low acuity type of calls. So we're talking about suicides, public assists, unknown problems. And when we say low acuity, we're not talking about they're not important, but these are calls that could possibly be remedied or addressed by the type of team that we're discussing here, which is essentially 1 or 2 firefighters in addition to a social worker. So we will connect the individuals to answers, the information, as it says in bullet number 3. Also try and develop a plan, a long-term plan to assist our patients. The idea being that we do not respond to the same individuals over and over again in a system that's really not designed to address their specific problems, whether that be mental health or substance abuse or some form of ongoing trauma, chronic trauma. So chat is not designed to respond to violent situations or any situations where a weapon is clearly present. So in those cases, obviously, we would have the assistance of our police department, sisters and brothers on that side of the hall. So we have been allocated currently 3 social work positions. We are in the process of interviewing those individuals right now. We have had approximately 16 applicants for those positions. That includes 1 supervisor and 2 social workers to operate in the field or to do a response, outreach, or follow-up with these patients. So that is a short summary of chat. Does anyone have any specific questions about where we are or where we're headed with that?
Yes, Councilmember Valamoros.
Thanks, Chief. I love this. I think I'm excited to see how this program works and the results that we may have, and like really evaluate, hey, this was a good program or not, it didn't work out the way we did, but I think it's a good step for us to really help alleviate some of those, police department calls, some of those recurring issues that are not violent, but are people that are suffering out there, and we see in the streets, especially in downtown Salt Lake City. So I'm excited, Chief. I've told you this before, so we'll see how it goes, and let us know how we can support you in promoting this, or any other way. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Baldemaros.
Any other questions or comments for the chief? All right. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Council.
And
I think
911.
Director Meyer from 911 is here.
Thank you, Director Meyer. The floor is yours, or the screen.
Good afternoon, council members. It's a pleasure to be with you again. 911, we have a direct role in all of these programs, whether it's, the logistics or the dispatching piece. I've been working very closely with Chief Brown, Director Riker, and Chief Lieb on implementing some of these. The one that we are most actively involved in at the moment, though, is the Mobile Crisis Outreach Team, MCOT, that a lot of you are familiar with. MCOT has both licensed clinicians who are highly trained and peer support specialists who are also certified. And each one of them have personal experiences in either past mental health issues or substance abuse challenges. So they're able to provide a compassionate, a person that they can lean on that's been in their place and that really, can provide a high level of care for them. The team arrives in unmarked vehicles to support privacy. They strive to keep those that they serve in their communities in their communities, out of hospitals and out of detention facilities. Their goal is, nobody goes to jail, nobody goes to the hospital if it's possible. They want to make sure that they stay in their communities where they can get the help and support that they need. SLC 911, we work closely with the leadership of MCOT. We're meeting at this point on a monthly basis, and we develop a seamless call flow with them to ensure that we can meet the needs of our callers and our visitors and provide mental health options where it's more appropriate than a police officer as an alternative response, to the call for help. I pulled some numbers from MCOT with my help with my friends over there. Since February of 2021, dispatch has referred 516 calls to MCOT. Our actual utilization is probably much higher than that. They only track the calls where we directly refer them, though. There's many cases where law enforcement can directly refer them, and so that's not even included in this number. Out of the 516 calls that we were able to divert over to MCOT, it was determined that only 39 of them actually needed law enforcement. So that's a pretty high percentage of those calls that normally would have been dealt with by a police officer, that we were able to get them the more appropriate help. 234 calls were able to be resolved just with a phone call with a crisis support professional. These are people, that just wanted to talk. They were having a bad day. They weren't necessarily, actively considering suicide or anything like that. And they were able to talk to them and get the issue resolved. And then out of that, 232 calls were handled by a direct in-person response where they were either referred to a higher level of care or they were able to just meet with them in person and get their issues resolved. Going forward, our future partnership with MCOT, we are starting a pilot program sometime later this year after the 1st of July, where they plan on having a counselor come in to dispatch so that they can take over those calls up front without having to wait. Part of the problem with our call flow now is we have to transfer them to MCOT. And obviously, if somebody's in a mental health crisis at the moment, a long hold time is not super beneficial to that situation. So they're going to experiment with having somebody come over, sit with our dispatchers, and either coach them through these calls or actually take them over themselves on a trial basis to see what kind of results they have and if they're, better than what we currently are experiencing. So with that, that's my presentation. I'm open for any questions if anybody has them.
Any questions for Director Meyer, Councilmember Fowler?
Thanks. I don't have a question. I just want to comment on all three of the presentations from Director Riker, Chief Lieb, and you, Director Myers. this is like exactly what I envisioned in my brain a few years ago when we started talking about alternative response models, and we've done so much work, and you as departments have done so much work, and Chief Brown, you've done so much work as well with really looking at between the audit and the funding sources and the creativity and the camaraderie and the collaboration between all of it. It just, like, good work. And these numbers are pretty incredible. I just, like, we still have a lot to do, but I certainly appreciate where we're at right now and where we're going and where the vision is going. So thanks to all four of you, chiefs and directors. Did I miss anybody? Nope. Okay.
And I would, I just echo what Councilmember Fowler said. I appreciate all this effort together and all these different avenues we're taking to support the quality of life of our residents. I appreciate everything you're doing. Without any other further questions at this time? Thank you very much. That was a wonderful presentation. Not wonderful, wonderful presentations, plural. Back to you, Ben.
So I believe that's everything for Budget Amendment 6. Staff will follow up on the several questions that we heard today. Being cognizant of the time, I can do a quick redistricting update if you want to move on to the next item.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think we're moving on. Did you have anything on the last
I
slide?
just had a question. Did we go over item 810, which is the Allen Park capital improvement project request? Did we talk about that already?
We talked about that in a previous briefing.
It's
budget neutral. It's switching two different funding sources since one of them is bond funding and they can't use it on the activation plan for Allen Park.
Okay.
And so they want to use CIP funding for the plan and then take the bond funding and use it for capital improvements.
Okay.
So it's not adding or subtracting funding for Allen Park, same level of funding. It's just switching the funding sources to align with legal limitations.
Great, thank you, Ben. I just wanted to point that out because we had a discussion about Pioneer Park earlier and there was some hesitation. But with Allen Park, I wanted to note that we didn't have that much hesitation in funding it when the $7 million request came and this council funded it, and we don't have much hesitation with this capital improvement plan. It's an East Side Park. I voted for this. I wanted this to happen, but Pioneer Park, as mentioned before, it's the lone wolf in downtown in a much-needed area of park. So I hope that the rest of the council members support what we're doing with Pioneer Park, as we have supported Allen Park. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the budget, or excuse me, the redistricting update.
Yes.
This is item number 8 on our agenda.
So the subcommittee met a second time and finished reviewing the 46 applications for the Redistricting Advisory Commission. And listed in the staff report are the 9 applicants the subcommittee is recommending for the full council's consideration. And this is 1 representative from each council district and then 2 at-large members. So the council could approve the applicants as a set with 1 straw poll up or down. A formal vote is not required. This is an informal process advising the council. And then the subcommittee asked me to pass along that their overall goal was having diversity represented in this group across multiple factors. And some examples of that, there are 5 women and 4 men. They span over 6 decades in their ages from youngest to oldest for generational diversity. Homeowners and renters are included. About half the households in the city are renters. Multiple ethnicities are represented. Several of these members are currently or previously served on community councils. Members of the LGBT community are included. There's a variety of professional and academic backgrounds. And some of the applicants live in neighborhoods that are likely to experience boundary changes. This includes Wasatch Hollow, the Central 9th Business District, Fair Park, and the Guadalupe neighborhoods. And then the two at-large members. One of the at-large members is from the West Side, District 2, and this was intentional to acknowledge and balance historical inequities, as well as recognize District 2 is the only district that lost population, so it's likely to have boundary changes as a result of that. The other at-large member is from District 4, which on the other end of the spectrum had the most population increase, so it will also see significant boundary changes. And I don't know if the subcommittee members wanted to add to what I just summarized.
I just want to say that I appreciate the effort that the subcommittee did. That was a lot of extra work. I mean, what Ben just rehashed was beautiful. So, Ben, could you just read through the names? And then we can take a straw poll on it. But I really appreciate the subcommittee's effort on this. It's nice work.
The recommended applicants are Eric Lopez for District 1, Marty Wolford for District 2, Mallory Bateman for District 3, Neil Vandermost for District 4, Eric Kenny for District 5, Ann Cannon for District 6, Elizabeth Maury for District 7, Daya, I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your last name, but I know you'll tell me how. Omen for at-large, and Daniel Cairo for at-large as well.
Thank you very much. And I'm thanking this group of 9 people ahead of time for their future work engaging in this process.
Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Pui.
I wanted to thank also the other applicants for putting their names out there. It was an amazing, impressive group of people. I hope we can get every single one of them on a board or another opportunity. So I hope that we can get involved if they are not already on a board. But thank you so much for all the putting their names out there and sending all that information.
So as of now, I look for a straw poll on this recommendation of these 9 candidates for our redistricting board.
Mr. Chair, I'll propose a straw poll, but before I do that, can I take a quick moment of personal privilege and just say,
absolutely,
about a day, I think 24 hours before the applications were supposed to be closed, I found out that District 5 did not have any applicants, so I frantically sent out a bunch of texts to people, and then we ended up with the most applicants. Several of them were people that I personally invited to apply, so thank you to everyone that did apply, and especially those that did apply but were not selected. Thank you for being willing to participate in that process. So with that, I'll make a straw poll that we support the the council subcommittee's recommendation for the committee of these 9 people that Ben read.
Everybody understand this, the straw poll? Thumbs up for approval? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to the newly formed Redistricting Advisory Commission.
Mr. Chair,
Boy.
Sorry, real quick. I just also want to thank Ben and our team for quickly getting meetings together with the 3 of us and having all of it ready. And it was there was time in it. We put time into it, but it was easy procedurally because of the work that our staff did to help us. And also thanks to other council members who gave us their input. We also want to say that we really did rely on a lot of what your input was as well, so that you know your districts better than probably we know your districts. So just want to thank everybody for their participation. Really was a neat process to go through, and saw a lot of people that we definitely need to get involved in our boards here. So thank you to all of you, particularly staff. Thank you.
And thank you, Ben, for that presentation briefing. All right, we'll move on to item 9. We're moving that on to next week. Item number 10, board appointment, Public Utilities Advisory Committee. And on the screen, we should have Alexander Lovell. Good evening, Alexander, and thank you for your engagement and for submitting your name in to be on our advice and consent. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on this board.
Yeah, that's a great question. Just want to make sure that you can hear me okay. Is that correct? Fantastic. A few years ago, I finished my PhD. I'm a political sociologist by training and education. Public policy is always something that just interests me. I'm probably, other than lawyers, somebody that actually enjoys reading the minutes of many different meetings and public policy just for fun. And I was speaking with one of my friends, Marian Hubbard, who some of you may actually know, and she had actually mentioned that the board was looking for a potential member as part of this group. And I did a little bit of research into it and thought it would be really interesting. I've lived in Salt Lake City for off and on over the course of the past 15 years, and I've owned a home in Rose Park for 10 years. Thank goodness I bought then. Because, as you know, the past 10 years have been very interesting from a property perspective. I'm very passionate about Salt Lake City, and I think Salt Lake has a lot of challenges ahead, particularly when it comes to public utilities, with rapid growth and expansion, along with modernization, along with simple the environment is changing and needing to manage and mitigate risks associated with that. I think is an interesting challenge, and it's something that I would love to be a part of. I would love to serve the community, and I think that this is a great way to do so.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Any questions for Alexander? Hey, thank you very much. You're free of any questions, which is good. I say that, it's funny, sorry, that didn't come off right. But I appreciate the engagement, and you'll be on our consent agenda tonight. To borrow a phrase from a former council chair, Wharton, you need not be present to win, but you always are welcome to the formal meeting starting at 7 o'clock. So thank you very much for your time and energy.
Thank you.
All right, we have one more board appointment, and that is for the same committee, the Public Utilities Advisory Committee, and we should have Catherine Floor. The time is yours.
Hello, good evening. Can everyone hear me?
Welcome, yes, thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening, and thank you for your engagement and your time tonight. So please tell us about yourself and why you want to be on the board.
Of course, thank you. My name is Catherine, and I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, born and raised. I developed an emotional connection to the environment very early, growing up fishing, hiking, camping, skiing, and that has guided my life and my career. When I was 17, I did some volunteer work in Oaxaca, Mexico, and that changed my life, and I saw the importance of serving the community and wanting to be part of it and understanding different perspectives. So with that, I got my bachelor's environmental studies bachelor degree in Monterey, California, and my capstone project was working with local schools and working with children in education of point and non-point sources of pollution. And these were children who didn't have access to the beach they weren't knowledgeable on this, and to see their passion grow for it, the more they were educated about pollution and our water resources, it was inspiring. And that also took me to want to get my master's in environmental engineering and water systems. So I'm currently a environmental planner at AECOM, and I work for transportation projects and water projects under the National Environmental Policy Act. So I do a lot of documents that get the holistic view of how we're impacting the environment and how it impacts the community. And I think the biggest passion for me in this is the equality and the environmental justice, because it is so important, and especially within our community, we have these watersheds that are beautiful, and I want to protect them at all costs. And I want to provide safe water for all communities, no matter what that looks like. So with my career, I have had the privilege to talk with Laura Briefer a couple times to get a better understanding of this department and how they're putting themselves out in the community and wanting to make a difference. And it is very interesting to see the differences between the consulting side and the local government side. And I'm very passionate about water and our resources and environmental justice. So this is a very exciting opportunity for me.
Catherine, thank you very much. Any question? Councilmember Fowler has a question.
Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much. I don't really have any questions. I just want to say thank you for representing District 7 and our neighborhood and our area, but then taking that obviously broader into our city and with your work, our state. When I first came on the council, Laura Briefer made me a water nerd. And so I feel your passion and get it. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to volunteer and spend time on our boards and help us make the right decisions as we continue to protect not just our water, but all of our environment in this area. And it's, I think, a passion for the majority of us, if not all of us on this council. So thanks for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fowler, and Catherine, and also Alexander. Your passion is wonderful, and you may be working with another passionate water woman. Can I call you that, Director Briefer? So I'm looking
My
forward
dad
to the
calls
work.
her the water lady.
The water
so
lady.
yeah.
So as I told Alexander, you're on our consent agenda tonight. You need not be present to win, but you can join us on the formal meeting at 7 o'clock. But thank you for your engagement, and thank you for your passion with water. Fully appreciate it. Have a great evening.
You too. Thank you, council members.
Okay, council, we're moving on to item number 12, report of the chair and the vice chair. Mr. Vice Chair?
None today, thank you.
I don't have anything else. Cindy? And we are looking to move to a closed session, so I would look for a motion to move to closed session pending reasonable and imminent litigation and advice of counsel.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Fowler, second by Councilmember Pui. I have to roll call this. Councilmember Fowler?
Yes.
Councilmember Pui?
Yes.
Warden?
Yes.
Mono?
Yes.
Baltimores?
Yes.
Peter Esser?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That passes unanimously. We are now adjourned from the work session and going to the formal closed session.
Welcome to Capital City News, your source for staying informed and engaged with Salt Lake City government. I'm your host, Brian Young with Salt Lake City TV. We spoke today with Erin Mendenhall, Mayor of Salt Lake City, about her State of the City address. Our History Minute is about the KKK and efforts to drive them from Salt Lake City. But before we get back to those, let's take a look at our legislative update, our look back, and our look ahead. At its February 1st meeting, the City Council received updates from the Mayor about the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and issues surrounding homelessness, received a briefing on the upcoming redistricting process. They also discussed Budget Amendment 6, looking at new city staff and additional emergency rental assistance funds from the federal government. And, along with Mayor Erin Mendenhall, they adopted a ceremonial resolution to mark the 20th anniversary of Salt Lake City's Olympic Winter Games. To learn more, visit slc.gov/council. On January 25th, Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall addressed a television audience for her annual State of the City address. From affordable housing solutions to homelessness support and a significant reduction in crime, Salt Lake City continues to forge ahead with goals that will build on Mayor Mendenhall's overarching priorities of harnessing growth of the city for the good of all residents, protecting the environment, creating inclusive and equitable opportunities for every community, and caring and supporting the city family.
It is our opportunity and our responsibility to make sure our unprecedented growth works for everyone.
To watch the full speech, visit our YouTube page. In an effort led by Mayor Erin Mendenhall, UTA fares will be free during the month of February. Traditionally, February is a very challenging month for air quality along the Wasatch Front, but public transit is part of the solution to offset the pollution and help improve air quality in the valley. Fares will be free in February across UTA's entire service area on all UTA bus and rail services, including Frontrunner, Ski Bus, Paratransit Service, Park City SLC Connect, and UTA On Demand. The easiest way to plan your trip is by downloading the Transit app, available in the App Store or Google Play, or plan your trip with Google Maps. So take a free ride and help clear the air.
The best way to defeat COVID-19 is by getting vaccinated and ensuring those around you are vaccinated too. Vaccines for COVID-19 are now available for kids aged 5 to 11. To set up your kid's appointment, visit the Salt Lake County Health Department website.
For our interview this week, we spoke with Salt Lake City Mayor Erin Mendenhall about her priorities in the coming year from her State of the City address.
We've been working really hard as a city, and I'm incredibly proud of both the residents and the businesses, but Salt Lake City Corporation team as well. And there's a lot to look forward to. We talked about a lot about air quality and the initiatives kind of from top at the climate, addressing the climate through carbon reduction and greenhouse gas emission reduction, talking about getting 100% net renewable energy coming into the city for every Salt Lake City customer by 2030, if not before. We also talked about having almost 100% of the city's renewable energy needs being met by this time next year, early next year. An 80 megawatt solar farm that we just broke ground on a few months ago will be up and running. All the way marching down sort of to your backyards. We're working on expanding public transit. We made a big reach late last year, by putting a rideshare program with UTA and a company called Vi, where you can get picked up. Sometimes it'll be a shared ride, and for only $2.50, you can basically get cheaper than an Uber or Lyft, but the same kind of connectivity to our public transit system or anywhere else in the service area. We're going to keep pushing the envelope on cleaning our air in every way we can, at every level that we possibly can as a city government. And one last thing was that on State of the City Day, we also announced with our partners the Free Fare February, which I think is the most grand experiment we've ever had as a state on transit ridership. We've never had a month of fareless transit. We've never had the ski bus and even Frontrunner included in it. So I challenge people to not just take it one time, but try using transit to get to a number of different destinations this month. And it's the future, really, of what quality of life should mean for residents along the Wasatch Front.
What are the next steps we should be looking to as you work to complete your vision from that you outlined?
We also saw a reduction in crime over the course of 2021, which was a significant swing from where we started. It's actually a 32-point reduction in crime to get to a 6% overall reduction. And this was after a dramatic increase throughout 2020 and into early 21 in cities really across the country. You're going to continue, I hope, to see our numbers of crime decrease, call response times decrease, which they've been doing month over month for several months now. You're going to see Salt Lake City Police Department be fully restaffed by this summer. So in addition to that, you could look forward to participating, I hope, in the Commission on Racial Equity and Policing, which continues their work of evaluating potential reforms, community integration into the training of our police department, and budget proposals, which were reflected in the work that we did with the council in our last budget. A lot of progress happening. It's never going to be done. And we're up for the fight. We're up for the conversation of asking, how do we do it better? How do we make this city safer for both our officers and our residents, and that we need you as a part of that conversation in order to make these great strides forward.
Related to that, and related to a lot of what you talked about in your State of the City as well, was housing and sheltering those without homes. I'm wondering if you could touch on that and what we're going to see coming up on that is going to look like.
Last year alone, Salt Lake City invested in more affordable units than we ever have before. We saw 345 new affordable housing units come online with Salt Lake City financial participation. And there's more than 700